You are watching Wolfe Street. I am your host, Smith. Remember, every story hides a secret, and every shadow hides a clue. Which part of the world are you watching from? Subscribe, hit the like button, and join the mystery. Let's drive the story. Chapter 1. When a man on Fifth Avenue says his signature is walking around town without him. You do not first ask whether he has been drinking. You ask whether he has been paying attention. I was paying attention that morning to the most important problem in the brownstone, which was that Fritz had announced breakfast would be late because the delivery boy had brought the wrong cut of bacon. Nero Wolfe considered wrong bacon a sign of moral decay in the metropolis. He sat behind his desk in the office, bulky as a courthouse and twice as final, reading a book with the displeasure of a man who prefers books to people but is often forced to settle for people. The bell rang. I went to the front door and opened it on a man who looked like money had dressed him and worry had undressed him. He was in his 50s, tall, clean, expensive and controlled. But there was a shallow flicker behind his eyes, the kind you see in men who have begun counting exits without meaning to. His overcoat was a good one. His gloves were good leather. His hat was the kind a man wears when he wants to remind the world. He is not a commuter. His face had the smooth, firm lines of a tycoon who had never once carried his own bags up a flight of stairs. "Archie Goodwin," he said. It was not a question. "That depends," I told him. "Are you here to donate to my retirement fund?" His mouth did not smile, but his eyes attempted it and failed. "I need Nero Wolfe." "All the way," I said. "Come in." I took his coat and hat and brought him into the office. Wolfe did not rise. Wolfe considers rising for visitors a practice best left to elevator operators. He looked up, took in the man and said, "Mr. Goodwin," I said. "Wolfe, this is a gentleman who knows my name and looks like he wants yours." The man spoke before Wolfe could deliver one of his speeches about attention being purchased. "Alton Kessler," he said. "I am told you are the only man in New York who can solve a problem without taking a bribe to forget it." Wolfe blinked once, slowly, which for him is a form of applause. "Sit, Mr. Kessler." Kessler sat in the red leather chair, not fully, as if he might have to stand suddenly. His hands rested on his knees, gloved, tight. Wolfe's voice was mild. "You have approached this house because you are in distress. Distress often makes wealthy men melodramatic. Avoid it." "I am not melodramatic," Kessler said. "I am cornered." Wolfe's eyes narrowed slightly. "That is more interesting. By whom?" "By paper," Kessler said. He produced a manila envelope as if it were contaminated. I took it and placed it on Wolfe's desk. Wolfe opened it with slow care, like a man examining a suspected poison, and began to read. Kessler watched Wolfe's hands, as if the paper might leap up and bite. Wolfe read a page, then another. His face remained impassive, but I know the signs. When Wolfe finds something pleasing, his eyelids lower, and his lips tighten slightly, as if he were restraining gratitude. He set the papers down. "You claim these contracts bear your signature." "They do," Kessler said. "They are perfect." Wolfe's gaze lifted. "Perfect signatures are rarely genuine. Genuine signatures contain humanity, and humanity contains imperfection." Kessler's jaw tightened. "I sign my name every day. I know it. That is mine. But I did not sign those papers. I did not even see them." Wolfe leaned back a fraction. "Then you are alleging forgery." "I am stating it," Kessler said. "And I am not here to argue vocabulary. I am here because the consequences are already moving." Wolfe's tone stayed calm. "Explain." Kessler exhaled. "The first contract is a purchase agreement for a warehouse in Queens. The second is a guarantee on a loan for a company with no employees. The third is an authorization for transfer of shares in one of my holding companies." Wolfe's eyes sharpened at that. "Shares? If those shares move, control moves," Kessler said. "And the transfer language is drafted by someone who knows exactly where to cut without making it bleed immediately." Wolfe nodded. "That is competent malice. Why have you not taken these documents to your attorneys?" "I did," Kessler said. "My counsel says the signatures will be presumed valid unless I prove otherwise. He advised me to do nothing publicly, because the minute a rumor starts that I am losing control of my own paperwork, every predator in Manhattan will smell it. Wolfe's mouth tightened, sensibly cynical. It gets worse, Kessler said. 2 days ago, a bank I do not use called my office and politely asked when I planned to honor the guarantee. They already treat it as real. And you refused, Wolfe said. I did. An hour later, I received a message. He produced a folded slip of paper. I handed it to Wolfe. Wolfe read, then gave it to me. It was typed. 1 sentence. Your signature is obedient. You should be too. That's friendly, I said. Kessler did not laugh. Last night, another contract surfaced. A non-disclosure agreement. It bears my signature and the signature of a man I have never met. Wolfe's eyes narrowed. A non-disclosure agreement is not a financial instrument. It is an instrument of silence. Kessler swallowed. Yes. Who is the other signatory? Wolfe asked. A man named Raymond Kroll, Kessler said. And who is Raymond Kroll? Kessler's mouth tightened. An internal auditor I hired last month. Wolfe's tone remained mild, but the air cooled. Why did you hire him? Kessler's eyes hardened. Because I suspected someone in my organization was bleeding money through procurement contracts. Not enough to alarm Wall Street, enough to irritate me. Wolfe nodded. Irritation is a powerful spur, Kessler continued. Kroll was thorough, quiet. He asked questions that made my staff uneasy. He was supposed to meet me yesterday afternoon. He did not arrive. I called his number. It went to a recording. I sent a driver to his apartment. No answer. Wolfe's gaze sharpened. You have not reported him missing. Kessler's voice tightened. Because if I report him missing, police will ask why I hired him. Then they will ask what he found. Then they will ask why my signature is on an agreement to keep him quiet. You see my dilemma. Wolfe regarded him for a long moment. Yes, you are being forced to choose between exposure and ignorance. That is why I asked you, Kessler said. You can work quietly. Sometimes, Wolfe said. He rose ponderously, crossed to the side table where Fritz had left his tray, and ate a forkful of roast beef with the solemnity of a man consulting an oracle. Then he returned to his chair, as if the building had been moved under him, not the other way around. I will take the case, Wolfe said. Kessler exhaled. Thank you. Wolfe lifted a hand, not for your gratitude. For the handwriting, the signature is too perfect. That indicates a person who has practiced to eliminate natural variation. Such a person does not do it for sport. He does it for necessity. Necessity implies compulsion. Compulsion implies vulnerability. I intend to find the human cost. Kessler stared, unsettled, as if Wolfe had just announced he was taking the case to protect the forger. Wolfe was not. Wolfe simply cannot ignore a mechanism, Wolfe said. You will provide every document bearing your signature from the past 6 months. Originals, not copies. You will provide the names of every person who handles your contracts and every notary involved. You will not contact Raymond Kroll again. If he contacts you, you will tell Archie. Kessler nodded. Yes, Wolfe added. You will not sign anything further until I permit it. Kessler's mouth tightened. That may not be possible. Wolfe's eyes narrowed. Then it is urgent. He looked at me. Archie, accompany Mr. Kessler, obtain the materials, speak with his assistant and his counsel, observe everything. That's my hobby, I said. Observing everything. Wolfe ignored me. He never rewards my genius with encouragement. We rode downtown through winter traffic, Kessler silent in the back seat, eyes fixed on the city as if trying to spot the trap. His office was on 5th Avenue, high enough to look down at the street like a judge, looking down at a guilty defendant. The lobby was marble and quiet, the kind of quiet that suggests a person might be thrown out for speaking too loud about something human. His executive assistant waited outside his office. Slim 40s, efficient posture, calm eyes. She had the controlled smile of a woman who has managed crises without letting them wrinkle her blouse. Mr. Kessler, she said, are you all right? Kessler's voice was tight. Mara, this is Archie Goodwin. He will be assisting Mr. Wolfe. Mara's eyes flicked to me, quick assessment. Of course, Mr. Goodwin. How may I help? Her calm was good, too good. Maybe calm can be competence. Calm can also be practice. Inside Kessler's office, a man in a dark suit stood near the window with a briefcase. Counsel, he introduced himself as Howard Pell and shook my hand as if measuring whether my grip contained law. I started requesting documents, lists, names, originals. Mara produced files with impressive speed. Pell offered small cautions disguised as advice. I assume Mr. Wolfe understands, Pell said. That premature contact with authorities could harm Mr. Kessler's market position. I will be sure to tell him you are worried about Mr. Kessler's position, I said. Wolfe loves that kind of poetry. Pell's mouth tightened. I am worried about exposure. Then we are all worried, I said. We just worry in different directions. Kessler sat at his desk, hands clasped, eyes on nothing. He looked like a man listening for a sound in the walls. At 5:48, a junior staffer knocked and came in with a clipboard. Mara took it, scanned it, and frowned. What? Kessler said. Mara's voice remained composed, but the rhythm changed. There is a courier downstairs with documents requiring your signature. He insists they are time-sensitive. Kessler's face tightened. From whom? Mara glanced at the clipboard. The Queen's property seller. That was the warehouse contract, making its second appearance. Now with a messenger attached like a leash, Kessler looked at me. What do I do? You do not sign, I said. Pell cleared his throat. Refusal could be construed as breach. Breach of what? I asked. A forged agreement. Pell's eyes narrowed. The signatures are not yet proven forged. Then let's not add fresh ink to their collection, I said. Kessler nodded once. Grateful. Tell the courier I am unavailable. Mara hesitated, then said, Yes, sir, and left. Kessler exhaled, as if he had been holding his breath for hours. Do you see? This is how they squeeze. Paper, timing, pressure, I said. If they wanted you dead, they would not bother with stationery. They want you obedient. Pell's expression stayed stiff. Speculation. Everything starts as speculation, I said. Then it turns into a headline. At 6 o'clock, Kessler's phone rang. He answered, listened, and his face changed in a way that made the blood drain from it. He looked at me as if I might have an instruction for how to stand. Kroll, he whispered. I stepped closer. What? Kessler swallowed. Not Kroll. The police. Pell straightened. Mara returned and stopped in the doorway, catching the temperature instantly. Kessler's voice was thin. Yes, I understand. I will come. He hung up and stared at us. They found Raymond Kroll, he said. Alive? I asked. Because hope is cheap. Kessler shook his head once, the motion small and final. In an alley behind a printing shop, he said. Stabbed, wallet still on him, nothing taken. Mara made a small sound, like a breath caught too late. Pell went very still. The case had just crossed the line Wolfe hates most, the line between cleverness and blood. Kessler's voice trembled. Goodwin, what do they want? I thought of the typed note. Your signature is obedient. You should be too, I said. They want you cornered. Pell's voice was tight. We must be careful. Police involvement will widen this. We did not invite it, I said. It arrived. Kessler stood abruptly. I have to identify him. We went. The police station was learned misery, the kind that comes with fluorescent lights and old coffee. An officer led Kessler into a back room while I waited in the corridor, watching men with badges try to act indifferent to another dead body. Kessler came out 10 minutes later, looking older. He did not cry. Men like Kessler do not cry in public. They calcify. That's him, he said. That's Kroll. You told the detectives about the non-disclosure, I asked. I told them nothing, Kessler said. Pell told me to say nothing. Pell nodded. Correct, I said. Excellent. Now we will tell Wolfe everything. We got back to Fifth Avenue. Kessler's office felt different now, as if death had stepped inside, even without being invited. Mara's hands shook slightly as she gathered the documents we needed. Pell kept insisting on caution, as if caution could unkill a man. While Mara worked, Kessler paced once, stopped, and said something that made my ears perk. "I cannot have this," he muttered. "Not after what my therapist said." I looked at him. "Your therapist?" Kessler froze, as if he had said it aloud by accident. Pell's eyes narrowed. Mara's head lifted too quickly. Kessler cleared his throat. "That is not relevant." "It's always relevant when it arrives uninvited," I said. "Who is your therapist?" Kessler's jaw tightened. "No one, forget it." I smiled pleasantly. "That was my plan, until you said it." Kessler's eyes flicked to Mara, then away. "It's a counselor I spoke with once years ago." Mara's face was composed, but her fingers pressed harder on the file folder. I noted it because the first rule of my trade is that people reveal more by trying to hide than by trying to explain. By 8, we had the bundle of originals and a list of names. I took them, left Kessler with Pell and Mara and a building full of marble that suddenly looked like a mausoleum, and headed back to West 35th Street. Wolfe was in the office when I returned, as if he had never moved. Which is usually true. Fritz had finally corrected the bacon situation, and Wolfe looked marginally less offended by existence. I put the documents on his desk and said, "Wolfe, they found Kessler's internal auditor, stabbed wallet on him, nothing taken." Wolfe's eyes narrowed, as expected. "Expected," I repeated. "You expected blood." Wolfe's voice was calm. "I expected escalation. A forger who can imitate perfectly is a craftsman. A craftsman can be hired. A hired craftsman can be threatened. Threat produces violence when paper fails." I said, "There's more." Kessler slipped and mentioned a therapist. Wolfe's gaze sharpened. "A therapist." "He tried to cover it," I said. "Pell tried to bury it." Mara looked like she knew what it meant. Wolfe leaned back slightly, and I could hear his mind shifting into a new gear. "Archie," he said. "Why frame a rich man? To make him obedient," I said. Wolfe nodded once. "Yes, and to what end?" I glanced at the stack of contracts, the perfect signatures, the transfer language, the non-disclosure with a dead man's name on it. I said, "To corner him into signing the next one." Wolfe's eyes stayed steady. "Precisely, there will be a next document, and if Mr. Kessler signs it, he will do so under duress that appears voluntary." I felt a chill. "So we wait." Wolfe's mouth tightened. "We prepare. Perfection has a human cost. Archie, someone paid it. Now someone is collecting." Then he looked down at the neat scripture of Kessler's signature and said, almost softly, "Find me the hand that wrote this, and I will show you the throat that held it." That was Wolfe being optimistic. And it was a fine hook for a case that had already drawn blood on day one. Chapter 2, if you want to learn what New York thinks of death, watch the first man on the scene who is not paid to care. He will glance, decide whether it inconveniences him, and then resume his schedule with a look of injured innocence. That is not cruelty. It is self-defense. The city would drown otherwise. At the brownstone that morning, we were not drowning yet. We were merely being nibbled to death by small irritations. Fritz had corrected the bacon fiasco, and Wolfe had eaten with the air of a man restoring order to civilization by sheer appetite. He was now in the office with a book and a beer, preparing to go upstairs for his orchids. When Wolfe is heading for orchid time, he becomes even less tolerant of interruptions, which is impressive if you have ever seen him tolerate anything at all. I was sorting Alton Kessler's documents into neat stacks on my desk, because even a con game deserves good filing. The originals were weighty, expensive, and drafted with the kind of language that makes you feel a migraine coming on. They all had Kessler's signature. They all had that signature in the same perfect angle, as if a machine had been taught to imitate pride. The doorbell rang, ignored it for half a second out of principle, then got up and answered, because principles are easier to maintain when you are not the one who has to mop the floor later. Inspector Kramer stood on the stoop with his hat tilted, his face red from winter, and his eyes narrowed with the irritated focus of a man who has already been told the day will not go his way. "Goodwin," he said. "Inspector," I said, "if you are here to borrow sugar, Fritz will want collateral." Kramer brushed past me without taking his coat off. That was how I knew something had snapped. Kramer takes his coat off when he expects to settle in and argue with Wolfe. He keeps it on when the city has shoved something unpleasant into his arms, and he is afraid it might leak. He marched into the office. Wolfe looked up slowly, as if deciding whether the law was worth acknowledging. "Inspector," Wolfe said, "your punctuality is alarming." Kramer gave a sound that was not quite a laugh. "Save it. We got another one." Wolfe's eyelids lowered. "Another what?" "Dead notary clerk," Kramer said. "Found in his office on Madison." I felt my stomach tighten, not because I was tender, because the case had already proven it was willing to spend lives to buy paper. Wolfe's voice stayed calm. "Name?" "Neil Bauer," Kramer said. "He was a clerk at a notary outfit, Madison Avenue. His stamp shows up on one of Kessler's contracts." Wolfe's eyes sharpened in that small way that means he is interested and annoyed at the same time. "How was he killed?" Kramer hesitated, then decided he might as well throw the whole mess onto the carpet. "A fountain pen," he said, jammed through his palm, right into the desk. Like the paper finally fought back. Wolfe's mouth tightened. Wolfe detests useless drama. He believes in efficiency even in murder. A fountain pen through the hand is not efficient. It is statement. "That was not a robbery," Wolfe said. Kramer's jaw set. "The boys say robbery." Office tossed. Stamp kit missing. Wolfe's gaze stayed on Kramer and the safe. Kramer blinked, then scowled, untouched. "And the drawers." Kramer's eyes narrowed further, closed, polite, like somebody staged a mess but did not want to inconvenience himself. Wolfe leaned back a fraction. "Then you agree it was staged?" "I agree it stinks," Kramer growled. "And I agree you are already in it. Kessler is coming apart. My squad wants to call it a robbery, so they can put it in a box. I do not want it in a box. I want the hand that held that pen." Wolfe regarded him. "Then you should attend to your duties." Kramer's eyes widened. "I am attending. I am here because you are going to attend too, whether you like it or not." Wolfe did not move. "I will not go to Madison Avenue to view a corpse pinned to a desk by a fountain pen. I have no need." Kramer's face reddened. "You will not." Wolfe's tone remained mild. "Archie will," I said. "That is the most romantic thing you have ever said to me, Wolfe." Wolfe ignored me. "Archie will accompany you, Inspector. He will observe and report. You will provide him access to relevant documents, including the logbook." Kramer's mouth tightened. "We do not hand out evidence to private detectives." Wolfe's gaze was steady. "You will if you want my cooperation." Kramer looked at me, then at Wolfe, then made the decision he always makes when he is caught between pride and results. "All right," he grunted. "Goodwin comes with me, but you stay here." Wolfe inclined his head as if granting a favor. "Naturally." As we were leaving, Fritz appeared in the doorway with the faint worried look. He gets when police energy enters the house. He values order. Kramer is a walking argument. "Mr. Goodwin," Fritz said quietly, "do you want coffee?" Fritz brought it, and I drank it fast enough to qualify as a medical experiment. We drove to Madison in Kramer's car through a winter that made the city look sharpened and impatient. People hurried. Taxis honked. The wind cut between buildings like it had a grudge. New York always looks as if it is late for something, and often it is. The notary office was in a building that smelled of heating dust and old ambition. We took an elevator that rattled slightly. When the doors opened, the corridor was crowded with uniforms and suits, and the air had that crime scene mixture of stale coffee, old paper, and something metallic underneath. A detective, I recognized, nodded at Kramer and gave me a look that suggested I was a nuisance he had been forced to tolerate by fate. "You brought Wolfe," he said. "No," I told him. "You got me. Wolfe is allergic to elevators." Kramer shoved through the doorway. The front room of the notary office looked like every small professional operation designed to make rich people feel safe about signing things. Beige walls, framed certificates, a reception desk. Chairs set just so. The ransacking had been arranged with almost artistic restraint. Papers were scattered, but the scattered looked planned. A drawer was pulled open, but not dumped with real fury. A file box sat tipped over, but its contents were fanned neatly, like someone had practiced the pose. The back office door was open. The smell arrived before the sight. It was not dramatic. It was simply the reminder that death has its own chemistry. Neil Bauer sat behind his desk, slumped forward slightly, as if he had been working late and decided to rest. His right hand was pinned to the desktop by a black fountain pen driven cleanly through the palm into the wood. The pen stood upright, making the hand look like a grotesque paperweight. I did not stare. Staring is either morbid or sentimental. Neither helps. Kramer stood beside me and muttered, "Robbery. My foot." The safe was in the corner, a squat metal cabinet. It was untouched. The desk drawers were shut. That detail mattered more than the scattered paper, because anyone can scatter paper. Closing drawers takes intention. I stepped closer, careful where my feet went, and examined the desk. There were ink stains on a blotter, a calendar, a stapler, a stack of notary forms. Nothing looked missing from the immediate work surface, except the stamp kit, which I was told had been taken. The pen itself was expensive, the kind sold to men who liked to feel important about writing. That also mattered. A cheap ballpoint would have done the job if the job was simply to kill. The pen was chosen to make a point. I asked the nearest detective, "What's missing?" "Notary stamp kit," he said. "The metal seal, the embossing press, and a couple of file folders." "And the logbook," I said, because Wolfe had already planted it in my mind. "We got the logbook," he replied, pointing to an evidence table where bags were lined up. In one bag was a thick ledger with a black cover, the kind that looks official because it is heavy. Kramer said, "Tell me what you see, Goodwin. You got the eyes. I got the headache." I leaned in and looked at the ledger through the clear evidence bag. The entries were neat, consistent, human, not too perfect. Not the work of the person forging Kessler's signature, unless the forger had decided to moonlight as a clerk for authenticity. Then I noticed the tear. A page was missing, not cut out cleanly, torn out with a ragged edge that suggested haste and strength. The paper fibers along the tear were pale and raw. I pointed. "Page gone." Kramer leaned in and swore softly. "That wasn't in the report." "It is now," I said. "Fresh tear. Whoever did it didn't do it a month ago. He did it recently." The detective frowned. "We didn't notice." "Then you need better light," I said. Kramer's glare suggested he might arrest me for being smug, but he nodded. "All right. Missing page means the killer wanted one record removed." "Or held," I said. Kramer's eyes narrowed. "Held for leverage." I nodded. "If it was destroyed, why bother tearing it out? You could burn the whole book." Kramer's mouth tightened. "Unless the book is needed later." "To prove something was notarized," I said. It was a small thing, printed with time scribbled in. Most of it was routine: mortgages, affidavits, settlement documents. At the bottom of yesterday's list, near the end of the day, there was one entry that looked wrong. 7:15 p.m. special, no name, no description. He used that word, the detective said. "Special." "Special isn't a client," I said. "Special is a secret." Kramer grunted. "Or a payoff." I looked again at the staged mess, the closed drawers, the untouched safe. The scene wanted to be labeled robbery. The scene also refused to behave like one. "Why stage a robbery?" I asked. Kramer's jaw clenched. "To make it look random, to keep the real target from seeing the pattern. And to justify the missing stamp kit," I added. "A stolen stamp kit makes forged documents look official." Kramer nodded. "Exactly, with that stamp. You can legalize lies." I looked again at the dead man's hand pinned by the pen. The hand, not the head, not the heart. The hand that witnesses signatures, the hand that validates them. The killer wanted us to look at the hand, I said. Kramer's eyes narrowed. He wanted Kessler to look at it. That landed and stayed. If Kessler saw that photo, he would feel the message in his bones. You can refuse to sign, you can refuse to comply, but paper can get you anyway, and the people behind it are willing to make a point. I asked about cameras. The corridor had one. The lobby had one. Inside the office. None. The killer had chosen a place where official recording stopped just short of the desk. We left after I had taken in everything I could. The fake disorder, the deliberate pen, the missing stamp, the torn page, the schedule entry that smelled like a meeting someone did not want recorded. I made a mental note to ask about the printing shop behind the alley where Kroll was found. Paper and ink were turning up everywhere, and I did not believe in coincidences unless they were paying rent. Back in Kramer's car, he drove with his jaw locked. You tell Wolfe I want something solid. I got 2 dead men and a tycoon sweating through his tailored shirts. I'll tell him, I said. And he'll tell you you're melodramatic. Kramer snorted. He already did. When we returned to the brownstone, Wolfe was in the office, not upstairs with his orchids, which told me he had forfeited orchid time for the case. That is Wolfe's version of rolling up his sleeves. He listened while I reported the details. When I described the safe untouched and the drawers closed, his eyes narrowed. When I mentioned the torn page, they narrowed further. A missing page, Wolfe said, is an admission of importance. Or fear, I said. The tear smelled fresh. Wolfe's mouth tightened. Paper has a scent, Archie. Most men never notice it. Those who do are either clerks or criminals. What about the pen through the palm, I asked. That's not a quiet kill. It is not meant to be, Wolfe said. It is a notice. It says, this is the price of witnessing signatures when the wrong people are writing them. I frowned. So who are the wrong people? Wolfe's gaze remained steady. Someone who needs Kessler obedient. Someone who needs documents notarized, and therefore needs a notary's cooperation or a notary's tools. Someone who is collecting leverage. And the missing logbook page, I said, it's either destroyed or kept. Wolfe nodded. Kept. Destroying it eliminates utility. Keeping it preserves it. I leaned forward. Utility for what? Wolfe's tone was calm. To prove an obligation exists, or to prove it was created through force, depending on who is holding it. Either way, it is leverage. Outside, a car horn blared as if the city objected to our conversation. Inside, the brownstone was warm and orderly, with the faint scent of wood polish and coffee, and above our heads the orchids waited on schedule, indifferent to human stupidity. Wolfe lifted his beer, took a slow swallow, and set it down with care. Then he said the sentence that meant my evening was now owned by paper. Archie, you will obtain for me every document Mr. Bauer touched in the last month. That's a lot of ink, I said. Yes, Wolfe replied. Murder likes work, and so do we. I stood. From Kramer. From Kramer and from Mr. Kessler, Wolfe said. Use influence. Use charm. Use nuisance. Use whatever you possess in excess. That would be nuisance, I said. Wolfe ignored me. He often does when I am correct. As I reached for my coat, my phone buzzed. Unknown number, which is the modern way of saying trouble has learned to type. The message was short, stop chasing paper. Next time we pin the hand that signs. I stared at it, then looked at Wolfe. He did not need to see the screen to understand. He read my face the way he reads contracts. Urgency, Wolfe said quietly. Yes, I replied. Wolfe's eyes narrowed, cold and satisfied. Good. Promises are useful. They tell you what the enemy values. And what do they value? I asked. Wolfe's voice stayed calm. Obedience. Now we will see what they demand in exchange for it. Chapter 3. When a man tells you his signature is being used without his consent, you expect the next move to be a demand. In this case, the demand was already in motion, gliding through the city on clean paper with dirty intent, as if Manhattan were a filing cabinet that never locked. I left the brownstone after Wolfe had absorbed my report about Neil Bauer and the torn logbook page with that quiet look he gets when his mind is not merely working, but rearranging. Fritz had offered me a sandwich for the road. I took it because a working man does not insult a genius, even when the genius wears an apron and cooks better than anyone in town. On Fifth Avenue, Alton Kessler's building rose like an argument. Marble, brass, guards with polite eyes, and a lobby so silent you could hear a cufflink itch. I gave the desk my name and my purpose. The guard made a call, listened, then nodded, as if allowing me upstairs was a favor he was doing for the concept of order. Mara Wexford met me outside Kessler's office. She had the same slim posture and tidy hair as the day before, and the same controlled smile. It was a good smile, used the way good linen is used, to cover stains before anyone else notices them. "Mr. Goodwin," she said. "Mr. Kessler is in a meeting," I said. "If he's meeting with my patients, tell him it left." Her smile tightened. "This is a difficult day." "They're all difficult," I said. "Some just have better furniture." She led me into a side conference room and offered coffee. I refused, because Kessler's coffee tasted like ambition and regret. While she was closing the door, I clocked how she did it. Not casually, not with the usual half-turn and shoulder nudge. She closed it softly, precisely, then tested it with her fingers to make sure it latched without clicking. That was either a woman who hated noise or a woman who hated being overheard. Kessler entered a minute later, with Howard Pell, the counsel, and a face that looked as if it had spent the night learning new fears. He nodded at me, sat, and said, "Goodwin, any progress?" "Plenty," I said, "but none of it is comforting." He looked at Mara. "Close the door." Mara's hand went to the handle again, that same careful motion. Pell watched her, then watched me. Kessler said, "Kramer told me about the notary clerk." "Notary clerk, yes," I said, with a fountain pen through his hand. "If you were hoping for subtlety, you hired the wrong enemies." Kessler's jaw clenched. "I do not know these people." "You don't have to," I said. "They know you. That is the advantage." Pell cleared his throat. "Mr. Goodwin, I would like to be present for any discussion of documents." "That's adorable," I said. "I'd like to be present for lunch. We all have wishes." Wexford's eyes flicked at me. She was good at not reacting, but she was a fraction too fast with her calm. Kessler leaned forward. "Kramer also told me you found another message." I hesitated half a second, then decided there was no profit in hiding it from the man being threatened. "Yes," I said. "A text. Stop chasing paper. Next time, we pin the hand that signs." Kessler's face went pale. Mara's lips tightened. Pell went rigid. Kessler whispered, "My hand." "Your obedience," I corrected. "Your hand is just the symbol." Kessler's voice was tight. "Have you found anything new?" I said. "Let's see what your machine has produced today." Mara stiffened slightly. "Mr. Kessler has refused to sign anything." "Refusal is not the same as prevention," I said, and looked at Kessler. "Do you have any new documents on your desk? Anything delivered since last night?" Kessler hesitated. "Yes, this morning, a transfer order." Pell's eyes narrowed. "We have not acted on it." "Acting is not the point," I said. "Show me." Kessler glanced at Mara. "Bring it." Mara left the room, quiet as a thought you wish you had not had. I watched her go, then watched Kessler. "Tell me about Raymond Kroll," I said. Kessler's jaw tightened. "I hired him to find theft." "And he did," I said. Kessler swallowed. "I do not know what he found. He did not get to tell me." Pell spoke quickly. "We cannot assume anything." I looked at him. "You can't assume your shoes are on, counselor, but you can still walk." Pell's face tightened. Kessler's eyes, strangely, softened a fraction. He was beginning to appreciate bluntness because his world had become too smooth. Mara returned with a single sheet in a clear folder, held by its edges as if it were infected. She handed it to Kessler, who handed it to me without touching it longer than necessary. It was titled Transfer Order. in a font that suggested authority. It instructed Kessler's holding company to move a block of shares into a receiving entity with a name so clean it sounded like a charity, Ashford Meridian LLC. The name had the kind of bland refinement that makes accountants feel safe. The signature at the bottom was Alton Kessler's, perfect and obedient. I felt a chill in my hands that had nothing to do with winter. This was not a warehouse in Queens. This was control. I looked up. You recognize this? Kessler's mouth tightened. It is my signature, and not your hand, I said. Not my hand, he replied. Pell leaned in. We will contest it. Contest all you like, I said. The point is why this exists. Ashford Meridian is the receiving bucket. If those shares move, someone else can vote them. Someone else can steer. Kessler's voice was raw. How can they get it processed? I tapped the page. With a notary stamp, with a clerk who signs off, with someone inside your system who can slip it through. Mara spoke smoothly. No transfer will occur without verification. I turned to her. You said that like a brochure. Her smile tightened. It is accurate. It is rehearsed, I said. Her eyes flashed for a fraction, then returned to calm. Mr. Goodwin, I do not understand your tone. My tone is free, I said. It is my signature that's obedient. Kessler looked at her sharply. Mara. She met his gaze. Yes, Mr. Kessler, he said. Where did this come from? Mara answered without thinking. Courier. 9:15. Too fast. Too neat, I asked. Which courier? Mara said. Eastbridge. Again too quick. People who actually receive documents all day do not file the detail that cleanly, unless they have been forced to. I leaned back. What's the tracking number? Mara said it at once. A string of digits. Perfect. Kessler stared at her. You remember that? Mara's smile held. I am your executive assistant. Kessler's voice tightened. You remember every number. I remember what matters, she replied. That line was a mistake. It implied she knew what mattered in a case where she should have been confused like everyone else. Pell cleared his throat. Mr. Goodwin, if you are suggesting impropriety. I cut him off. I'm suggesting that someone in this building is helping a forgery function. If that offends you, you should sue the concept of reality. Kessler's eyes were hard now. Mara, who else handles my incoming legal deliveries? Mara's voice stayed smooth. No one. I do. Kessler's jaw clenched. And who has access to my signature samples? Mara hesitated for the first time. It was small, but it was there. Your files are secured. Kessler's voice sharpened. That was not my question. Mara's hands tightened around the folder she held. I do, Mr. Pell does. Your finance director does. Kessler turned to Pell. Finance director. Pell nodded stiffly. Seth Ainsley. Kessler's face tightened. Ainsley has been with me 6 years. 6 years is time, I said. Time grows habits. Kessler's voice was low. Do we have the ability to trace the courier deliveries? I said. We do, and Saul Panzer is already doing it. That made Mara blink. It was the first time she looked uncertain, as if she had not expected that piece. Kessler said, Saul Panzer. Wolf's man, I said, quiet, thorough, and allergic to brochure lines. Mara's mouth tightened. Pell looked annoyed. Kessler looked relieved, which told me he had reached the stage where he would rather be saved than dignified. I stood. I'm taking copies of this transfer order. Pell bristled. It is privileged. It's forged, I said. Privilege doesn't cover crime. Kessler nodded. Let him. Mara's gaze followed me as I slid the page into my folder. Her calm had a new edge. It looked like calculation. I left them there and went back to the elevator with the feeling that I had just stepped on a polished floor that might be hiding a trapdoor. Back at the brownstone, Wolfe was in the office, not yet upstairs with the orchids. That told me he was expecting Saul. He gave Wolfe the transfer order copy. He studied it with the expression he reserves for insults delivered in elegant handwriting. Shares? He said. Yes, I replied. Ashford Meridian, LLC, clean name, dirty purpose. Wolfe's eyes narrowed. The forger has progressed from nuisance to leverage. He is attempting to seize control. Also, I said, Murrah Wexford talks too smoothly and remembers dates too quickly. Wolfe looked at me. That is your contribution? It is, I said. People who tell time like that are reading from a card. Wolfe's mouth tightened. Possibly, or they are simply competent. Competent people hesitate when they are frightened, I said. She didn't until I mentioned Saul. Wolfe's eyelids lowered. Interesting. The doorbell rang, and this time it was music to my ears because it meant Saul Panzer had arrived. Saul came into the office wearing his usual expression of mild disinterest, which is his way of staying invisible. He nodded to Wolfe. Boss. Wolfe said, Report. Saul looked at me briefly, then back to Wolfe. Courier service is Eastbridge, like you expected. I followed their pickup schedule. The deliveries to Kessler's office were not dropped by random messengers. The pickups were scheduled through an account that doesn't exist in their customer records. I leaned forward. Fake account. Saul nodded. Paid in cash, crisp bills, fresh. The clerk at Eastbridge likes to talk when he thinks he's being admired. And he admitted the account was set up by a man who gave a business name and a prepaid phone number. No address, no billing contact, cash only. Wolfe's eyes narrowed. And the name used? Saul shrugged slightly. Something bland, like a company that sells office chairs. It was chosen to be forgotten, I said. Any description of the man? Medium height, neat, polite, Saul replied. The kind of polite that makes people remember the politeness and forget the face. Wolfe nodded once. A businessman. Saul continued. The pickups were scheduled in advance, not emergency rush, routine, weekly, like payroll. I looked at Wolfe. The forger isn't hiding. Wolfe's voice was calm. Number, he is operating like a businessman. Saul said, One more thing. The Eastbridge driver, who did the 9:15 delivery to Kessler today, did not pick it up from their warehouse. He picked it up from a private mailbox store on Lexington. He signed for it under the fake account name. The clerk there remembers him because he tipped too much. I whistled softly. A generous criminal. Wolfe's mouth tightened. Or a confident one, Saul finished. I got the mailbox number. Wolfe's eyes sharpened. Excellent, I said. We can get the camera footage at the mailbox place. Saul nodded, if it hasn't been erased. Wolfe leaned back slightly, and I could see the pattern forming in his mind like ink spreading through paper. We have, Wolfe said, a dead internal auditor, a dead notary clerk, a missing logbook page, and now a forged transfer order designed to shift control. The murderer has not retreated. He has accelerated, I said. And Kessler is being shoved toward obedience with every new sheet. Wolfe's gaze turned cold. Yes, he is being cornered. Saul looked at Wolfe. What do you want me to do next? Wolfe did not answer immediately. He was listening to something else, something that wasn't in the room. Wolfe does that when he is aligning motive with method. Then he said, Archie will visit the mailbox store. He will obtain footage, and he will obtain the name of the person renting that box if it exists. I said, if it exists. Wolfe's eyes narrowed. It may not, but something will. Paper always leaves crumbs, even when it is used as a weapon, Saul said. And me. Wolfe looked at him. You will remain near Mr. Kessler's office. Someone is managing this operation in person. They are close. They will check their work. When they do, I want to know. Saul nodded once, and left quiet as a shadow. I stood, already reaching for my coat. Wolfe said, Archie, yes. Be careful, Wolfe said. It sounded strange coming from him. Wolfe does not usually waste syllables on caution unless he believes the danger is no longer theoretical, I said. The danger is a pen. Wolfe's eyes were cold, and a hand. As I headed for the door, my phone buzzed again. Another unknown number. This time the message was shorter, Sign or we notarize you next. I stared at it for half a second, then felt my mouth go dry. Because that was not a threat aimed at Kessler, it was aimed at me. Chapter 4. There are two kinds of experts in New York. The first kind tells you what you want to hear and sends you a bill. The second kind tells you what you need to hear and sends you a larger bill. Wolfe prefers the second kind, though he regards the invoice as a personal insult and treats it as a moral failing in the sender. Wolfe's choice was Ezra Leland, who looked as if he had been built from grey paper and sharpened with a ruler. He arrived at the brownstone with a leather case and a manner that suggested he would prefer to work in a monastery where nobody signed anything. Fritz brought him coffee. Leland thanked Fritz as if he were granting a minor dispensation. Wolfe watched the exchange with irritation, not because Leland was impolite, but because Wolfe does not like strangers accepting Fritz's hospitality as if it belongs to the city. "Mr. Leland," Wolfe said, "you will examine these signatures and tell me how they were produced." Leland looked at the stacks on Wolfe's desk, then at Wolfe, then at me, and said, "I will tell you what I can prove." "That is all you will be paid for," Wolfe replied. I had arranged Kessler's documents the way a priest arranges sacred texts, with care and mild resentment. There was the warehouse contract, the loan guarantee, the non-disclosure agreement with Raymond Kroll's dead name on it, and the new transfer order moving shares to Ashford Meridian LLC, which sounded like a church and behaved like a shakedown. Leland did not reach for a magnifying glass right away. That disappointed me. I like props. He spread the documents out, studied the signatures in ordinary light, then turned them under a little angled lamp from his case. Only then did he use a loupe, and he did it the way Wolfe uses questions. He waited until he knew what he was looking for. He worked silently for a while. Wolfe sat rigidly in his chair with the expression of a man enduring a public nuisance for a private reward. I sat at my desk and watched, because watching is what I do best when there is nothing immediate to punch. After 15 minutes, Leland made a small sound. Like a man swallowing a laugh, Wolfe's eyelids lowered. "Well," Leland looked up. "They aren't traced," I said. "That's what I suspected. Too perfect to be traced." Leland's eyes flicked to me, not hostile, merely dismissive. Traced signatures show hesitation, pressure shifts, stops where the hand waits for the eye. "This doesn't have any of that," Wolfe said. "Then how?" Leland tapped a signature lightly. "Constructed." Wolfe's eyebrows rose a fraction, which for him is a trumpet blast. "Constructed. Built stroke by stroke from practice," Leland said. "The forger has learned the signature like a musician learns a piece. Not by copying the outline, but by mastering the motions, the rhythm, the pressure, the turns." I felt my spine tighten. A traced signature is a trick. A constructed signature is a craft. Craft means commitment, and commitment means the person doing it is either obsessed or paid very well. Wolfe's voice stayed calm. "How much practice?" Leland's mouth tightened. "A great deal. Hundreds of repetitions, probably more. Enough to eliminate natural variation. Enough to sign in a hurry and still look flawless." I said. "So our man can sign Kessler's name without looking?" "Likely," Leland replied, "and he has practiced on good paper." Wolfe's gaze sharpened. "Good paper." Leland nodded. "This is not cheap office stock. The ink sits cleanly. There's a slight tooth. The pen pressure is consistent because the surface holds it. Whoever practiced chose paper that behaves. Fancy paper for cheap secrets, I thought, and kept it to myself, because Wolfe hates it when I sound pleased with my own phrasing." Wolfe asked. "Can you identify the ink?" Leland considered. "High, quality fountain pen ink, not rare, but consistent. It's the same across multiple documents. Same saturation, same slight sheen when light hits it. One person, one instrument, one habit." I glanced at Wolfe. Ink-stained fingers. Wolfe ignored me, but his eyes narrowed in a way that told me he had taken the phrase and set it aside for later use, Leland added. "The construction suggests something else." Wolfe's gaze held. "Yes. The forger is not only skilled," Leland said. "He is disciplined. A sloppy person cannot produce this. He is careful. He is patient. He is capable of doing the same thing for hours. Wolfe's mouth tightened. A man with a lawyer's patience. I blinked, and Wolfe looked at me. You told me, Wolfe said. Yes, I admitted. Print shop owner described a customer that way. I hadn't connected it yet. Wolfe's eyes narrowed. You had not connected it because you were busy admiring your own observations. Continue. I gave Wolfe the short version of Saul's courier work, the mailbox lead, and the way the notary record had been tampered with. Leland listened with mild interest, like a man learning that someone had used paper badly. When Leland finished, he packed his tools with care and said to Wolfe, "If you find the practice sheets, you will likely find the man." Wolfe nodded. "Archie will find them." Leland looked at me as if measuring how much trouble I could cause. Be aware people who practice that much do not surrender easily. I don't surrender easily either, I said. I just complain while I'm winning. Leland left. Fritz cleaned the coffee cup. Wolfe watched Fritz for a moment with the softness he reserves for competence, then returned to being Wolfe. He said, "Archie, you will go to the print shop again." I stared. "It's smoking. Smoke dissipates," Wolfe said. "Information does not, unless it is removed. It has been removed. Find who removed it." I opened my mouth to argue that I was not a bloodhound with a tie, then decided it was useless. Wolfe is an armchair detective, but he can still push. Saul Panzer arrived that afternoon with the quiet step of a man who never announces himself to trouble. He had been watching Kessler's office and the courier pipeline, and he had more of the same. Cash accounts, prepaid numbers, deliveries scheduled like routine, businesslike. That word kept returning, Wolfe said. The forger is operating like a businessman. Saul nodded. Yes, he makes appointments. He pays on time. He cleans up after himself. Except, I said, he is now burning and stealing ledgers. Wolfe's eyes narrowed. Cleaning up can be aggressive. That evening, I went back to Midtown, not because I wanted to, but because Wolfe wanted an answer. And Wolfe's wants have a way of becoming my schedule. The print shop looked normal from the street, which in New York can be the most suspicious thing in the world. If a place has been hit and smoked out, you expect yellow tape or at least a bored cop. Instead, there was only a faint smell of scorched paper lingering like a cheap perfume. Inside, the front room was cleaned, too cleaned. Display shelves were straightened, papers were stacked. The bell on the door jingled as if nothing had happened. The owner looked up when I entered, and his face tightened. He recognized me and did not welcome the memory. You, he said. Me, I said, still breathing. You too, which is an accomplishment in this case. He glanced around the shop, then said, We are closed. Then you have plenty of time, I replied. His mouth tightened. I told you what I knew. You told me you had a ledger, I said. Then you told me it vanished. I want to know who made it vanish. His eyes darted to the back room door. Fear has a way of making directions obvious. I can't, he whispered. You can, I said, unless you want to be the next one pinned down by office supplies. That was cruel, but cruelty is sometimes the only language that reaches frightened people. I did not like it, but I liked dead clerks less. The owner swallowed. They came back. Who? I asked. Men, he said. 2, same ones as earlier. They said they were inspectors, but they weren't inspectors. Their shoes were too clean for inspectors. That detail pleased me in this town. Shoes can tell the truth when mouths refuse. What did they do? I asked. He hesitated, then said, They went to the back room. They took the ledger. They did not take money. They did not take stock. They only took that book. Then one of them said, very politely, We are sorry for the inconvenience. I nodded. Polite, forgettable. He looked at me sharply. You know them. I know the type, I said. Did you see their hands? The owner's eyes narrowed as he tried to remember. One had stains ink on his fingers. My pulse tightened. Ink, stained fingers. Yes, he whispered. Describe him, I said. The owner shook his head. I can't. That's the problem. He looks like he belongs anywhere. Suit. Calm. He could be a banker. He could be a lawyer's clerk. And the other? I asked. Bigger, the owner said. Not rough, but solid. He stood in the doorway like a warning. That sounded like a handler and muscle. Businessmen hire muscle. Did they say a name? I asked. The owner swallowed. Number. I leaned closer. Did they mention a company, a firm, anything? He hesitated, then said. One of them said, "Tell Mr. Wolfe to stay in his house." My jaw tightened. That was new. They know Wolfe, I said. They know everything, the owner whispered. I was about to ask about camera footage, because any midtown shop that sells fancy paper to nervous people also sells itself a sense of security. Before I could, the owner shook his head. No camera, he said quickly. That's a shame, I replied, because I was going to ask for it. He stared at me. How did you know? Because criminals hate cameras, I said. If you had one, they would have disabled it, not removed your ledger. So either you never had one, or someone told them where it was and how to kill it. His face went pale, and now he looked guilty on top of frightened. You turned it off, I said. He swallowed. They asked. Asked, I repeated. They were polite, he said miserably. And they said if I cooperated, I would keep my shop. If I didn't, I would lose more than paper. I nodded. You traded your ledger for your life. His eyes filled. Yes, I did not blame him. Not entirely. New York is full of men who make that bargain every day, and most of them do it without ever being asked. I left him with my card, and a warning to call me if he remembered anything else, like a license plate or a particular scent, anything that could become a handle. He nodded like a man agreeing to pray. Outside, the street was sharp with winter, and I walked fast. I called Saul and told him the ledger was taken by 2 men, one ink stained, one solid, and that they had name, dropped Wolfe. Saul was quiet a moment, then said, "That means they're close enough to think they can intimidate him." "No," Saul agreed, "but they can try." Then I called Inspector Kramer and told him the print shop was hit by 2 men posing as inspectors. Ledger taken, no money taken, and the owner was pressured to turn off his camera if he had one. Kramer made a sound like a man swallowing a fist. They're bold. They're businessmen, I said. They handle risk like paperwork, Kramer growled. If I find them, I'll show them what my paperwork looks like. Back at the brownstone, Wolfe listened to my report without moving, except for his eyes, which tightened at the right points. They mentioned my name, Wolfe repeated. Yes, I said. They told the shop owner to tell you to stay in your house. Wolfe's mouth tightened. That was foolish. It wasn't foolish, I said. It was confident. Wolfe nodded slowly. Yes, confidence, or urgency. When a man begins issuing warnings, it often means his schedule is threatened. I said. The ledger is gone, but I photographed the page before it vanished. Initials were Rock. Wolfe's eyes narrowed. Either they are using Kroll's initials to misdirect, or they are placing a marker for themselves. Or both, I said. Wolfe leaned back slightly. We now have a forger who constructs signatures, who purchases paper and ink regularly, who uses courier services under fake accounts paid in cash, and who has begun erasing records when approached. That is not a hobby. That is an enterprise. And enterprises have bosses, I said. Wolfe's gaze sharpened. Yes, and enterprises have deadlines. I took out my phone and showed Wolfe the newest message I had received while walking back from Midtown, because the enemy was still doing business with my nerve sign, or we notarize you next. Wolfe looked at it, expression unchanged, and said, They are expanding their audience. I swallowed, meaning they're talking to me now. Wolfe nodded. Yes, because you are closer than Mr. Kessler. They think pressure on you will pressure him. That's flattering, I said. I always wanted to be used as leverage. Wolfe ignored me. Archie, bring Mr. Kessler here tomorrow. I blinked. To the brownstone. Wolfe's eyes narrowed. Yes, he is safest here, and I require him within my reach. Also, I will need to observe him when the next demand arrives. You think there will be a next demand, I said. Wolfe's voice was calm. There is always a next document, Archie. Paper does not kill two men unless it intends to collect something valuable. I nodded slowly, feeling the case tighten around us like a well-tied knot. As I stood to leave the office, the doorbell rang again. I went to answer it, expecting another cop or another messenger. Instead, it was a boy, maybe 16, with a cheap cap and a grin that had nothing to do with happiness. He held out an envelope, thick, cream stock, the kind Leland had described. "Delivery," he said, "for Mr. Wolfe." I took it, and the boy bolted down the steps before I could ask who paid him. I carried the envelope into the office and handed it to Wolfe. Wolfe looked at it as if it were an insect, then opened it with care. Inside was a single sheet of fancy paper. At the bottom was Alton Kessler's signature. Perfect. At the top were 6 words, typed "Meet alone. Bring your pen, midnight." Wolfe read it, then looked up at me. "That," I said, "is a deadline." Wolfe's eyes were cold. "Yes." He set the paper down, and the air in the office seemed to tighten. "Archie," Wolfe said, "we will not allow Mr. Kessler to meet anyone alone." "And if he refuses?" I asked. Wolfe's voice stayed calm. "He will not refuse, not after 2 corpses and a pen through a hand. Fear makes men obedient, but it can also make them desperate. We must prevent desperation from making decisions." I looked at the neat signature and felt my throat go dry, because now the enemy had stopped cleaning up old records. He was writing new ones. Chapter 5, if there is one thing New York does better than sin, it is paperwork. Sin is amateurish. Paper is professional. It has letterhead, receipts, and a filing system. It also has the advantage of looking respectable while it tightens around your throat. Wolfe spent the morning in the way that always makes me nervous, which is to say he sat perfectly still and made phone calls. When Wolfe is restless, he bellows. When Wolfe is truly engaged, he becomes calm, polite, and faintly murderous. He had already sacrificed orchid time twice, which in our household counts as a public emergency. Fritz moved quietly, as if the air might be charged. I stayed at my desk and tried not to think about the message on fancy paper that said "Meet alone. Bring your pen, midnight," because I dislike any instruction that assumes I will obey. Wolfe called Mr. Kessler's counsel and informed him, in a voice of mild contempt, that legal caution would not stop a man who used a pen as a nail. He called a contact at the state registry and extracted information with that genial persistence that makes people forget they are being drained. He called a banker he despised and was greeted with false warmth. Wolfe returned it with real contempt and still got what he wanted. At 11:30 he finally swiveled his eyes toward me. "Archie," he said, "Ashford Meridian, LLC is not merely a receptacle." I looked up. "It's a buyer." Wolfe nodded once. "It is purchasing power." "Power where?" I asked, already suspecting the answer. Wolfe's mouth tightened. "In Mr. Kessler's charitable foundation." I sat back. "That's bold." "It is quiet," Wolfe corrected. "Quiet power, loud leverage." I frowned. "The Kessler Foundation is controlled by board votes. Donor optics, public goodwill. You can't just buy it." "You can buy influence," Wolfe said, "and you can buy shares in subsidiary entities that control disbursements. Mr. Kessler's foundation is structured with an investment arm. Ashford Meridian has been purchasing a controlling interest in that arm through intermediaries." That was the kind of sentence that makes you want to throw a chair. Not because it is dramatic, but because it is plausible. Rich men build foundations the way they build fortresses. They forget that fortresses have gates and gates have clerks. "Intermediaries," I said, meaning it won't show up as Ashford Meridian in neon. Wolfe nodded. "Correct. It shows up as small transactions, clean names, calm paper. It is the same style as the forgeries, businesslike," I said. "So this isn't just about stealing Kessler's signature. It's about taking his foundation." Wolfe's eyes narrowed. "It is about taking his obedience, The foundation is the cudgel. Fritz appeared with a tray, set down coffee, and retreated. Wolfe did not thank him, which is Wolfe's version of being distracted by the apocalypse. My phone rang. I answered, and heard Alton Kessler's voice, tight and raw, like he had been breathing through a cloth. "Goodwin," he said. "They contacted me again." "Where are you?" I asked. "My office," he said. "With Pell. Mara is outside." I glanced at Wolfe. He was already listening. "What did they say?" I asked. Kessler swallowed. "They said I have one chance, one final document. If I sign it willingly, everything stops. If I do not, the forged trail goes public." My jaw tightened. "Public how?" Kessler's laugh was bitter. "By mail, by press, by regulators, by federal agencies that do not enjoy signature fraud and share transfers. They said I will be charged, not them, me." That was the cage snapping shut. The forgeries were not only a theft, they were a trap designed to make the victim look guilty enough to destroy himself defending innocence. Wolfe spoke, voice low but clear. "Mr. Kessler, listen carefully." Kessler's breath caught. "Mr. Wolfe." Wolfe said, "Do not sign anything. Not one stroke. If you agree to meet them, you will be escorted. If you go alone, you are a fool. If you are a fool, I cannot assist you." There was a pause. Then Kessler said, "I will not sign, but they have proof. They have documents, not just copies, originals. They said they will deliver them to the authorities." Wolfe replied, "Then we will intercept their delivery or make their delivery worthless." Kessler's voice shook. "How?" Wolfe's tone stayed calm. "By identifying the forger and his employer. The moment we do, the public narrative shifts from your weakness to their coercion." Kessler exhaled as if he had been holding a boulder. "I will come to your house today. Pell insists I should not." Wolfe said, "Bring him. He will be useful as an obstacle." Kessler ended the call. I set the receiver down and looked at Wolfe. "They're using his reputation as bars." Wolfe nodded. "Yes, the cage is forged paper. The bars are his public name. He tapped the stack once, before tonight is over. Archie, bring me a sample of Mr. Pell's office stationery. Paper and ink. Habits are detectable." I said, "That's the cleverest part. They don't need to win in court. They just need to ruin him in headlines." Wolfe's eyes narrowed. "Correct. A man like Kessler is more frightened of disgrace than death. That is why they chose him." "And why they frame him," I said. "Not to steal money, to steal freedom." Wolfe's gaze stayed steady, precisely. At 1, Saul Panzer arrived with another piece of the puzzle. He sat in the chair opposite Wolfe and said, "I spoke to Eastbridge again." Wolfe's eyelids lowered. "And," Saul said, "the courier, who handled most of the Kessler deliveries, is named Edwin Phelps. Mid-30s, quiet, reliable. He is the one who did the 9:15 drop yesterday. I found his route records." I leaned forward. "You found where he picked up?" Saul nodded. "Yes, the private mailbox store on Lexington. Same place as before." Wolfe said, "Bring him here." Saul shook his head. "I tried." He refused. He said he does not want trouble. "That is unfortunate," Wolfe said. Saul added, "He did agree to meet Archie off the record. He thinks Archie is less dangerous than police." I said, "That's flattering and also wrong." Wolfe's eyes narrowed. "Where?" Saul replied. "A diner on 8th, 7 o'clock." Wolfe looked at me. "You will go." "I was planning on it," I said. "I like diners. They make lies taste better," Wolfe said. "You will not mention me. You will not threaten him. You will persuade him. If he is frightened, remind him he is already involved." I stood. "That I can do." By late afternoon, Kessler arrived with Pell. Mara Wexford did not come, which Wolfe noted without comment. Kessler looked exhausted. Pell looked irritated, as if fatigue were an inconvenience that should be billed. Wolfe listened to Kessler repeat the threat in detail, then asked questions with the calm precision that makes people feel stripped. "What is the final document?" Wolfe asked. Kessler swallowed. "They did not specify." Wolfe nodded. "Then it is not yet drafted, or it is drafted, and they do not wish to reveal its nature until you are trapped." Pell cleared his throat. "Mr. Wolfe, my client is in danger of federal exposure. We must consider protective disclosure." Wolfe regarded him. "Protective disclosure is a phrase used by lawyers to mean panic with stationery." Pell's mouth tightened. "It is responsible," Wolfe replied. "It is premature. If you disclose now, you will invite every agency you fear and still not catch the culprit. You will become busy while the enemy remains free." Kessler's voice was low. "Then what do I do?" Wolfe's gaze held him. "You will do nothing without me. That is your task." Kessler nodded, like a man accepting an unfamiliar religion. When they left, Wolfe finally went upstairs for half an hour to check his orchids, and I took that as a sign the world had not ended yet. At 6:30 I left for the diner. The city at dusk looks like it is trying to wash its face without water. Lights come on. People hurry. Wind moves between buildings like a thief. I found the diner Saul had named, a narrow place with cracked stools and coffee that could strip paint, perfect for frightened couriers. Tidwin Phelps was in a booth near the back, wearing a cheap jacket and a look of practiced invisibility. He was not tough, just wary. His hands were clean, which was the first relief I had felt all day. He glanced up. "Goodwin." "Phelps," I said, sliding into the booth. "You deliver trouble with impressive punctuality." He did not smile. "I deliver packages." "Sure," I said, "and knives deliver warmth." His jaw tightened. "I don't want police." "You're going to get them anyway," I said, "unless you help me stop the people who will blame you when this blows up." He swallowed. "I didn't forge anything. I just picked up what my dispatcher told me." "That's how most crimes are assembled," I said. "Little pieces handled by men who tell themselves they're only carrying paper." He stared at his coffee. "I didn't know it was that kind of paper." "You know now," I said. "So talk." He hesitated, then said, "The pickups." They were under an account name, Ashford something Meridian, cash payments. My dispatcher liked it because cash is easy. "Who brought the packages?" I asked. Phelps swallowed. "A man. Always the same. He'd meet me outside the mailbox place, or outside a building lobby. He was polite. He tipped." I leaned forward. "Describe him." Phelps frowned. "Struggling. Average suit. Clean, nothing to grab." "Ink," I said. Phelps blinked. "Yeah." Sometimes his fingers had stains, like he handled ink bottles. My pulse tightened. "License plate." Phelps shook his head. "He walked, or he came in a cab." "Which cab company?" I asked. Phelps grimaced. "How would I know?" "Yellow." I sighed. "Fine. The mailbox place." "Which box?" Phelps hesitated. Then he reached into his pocket and pulled out a crumpled receipt. "I kept it," he said, "because something felt wrong after the notary guy got killed." He slid it across the table. It was a printed slip from the private mailbox store. It had a box number on it and a date. Box 714. I felt a jolt of satisfaction that lasted half a second. Then Phelps said, "There's more." I looked up. Phelps's voice was thin. "Yesterday the man told me to be careful," he said. "You're the only one who can ruin this if you talk." I stared at him. "He threatened you?" Phelps nodded. He said he'd make it look like I stole the documents. He said the police would love a simple story. I held the receipt tighter. "That's why you're here." Phelps swallowed. "Yeah," I said. "You did the right thing." That was when the diner's front door jingled, and a man in a dark coat entered, glanced around, and left too quickly. Phelps saw it too, his face drained. "That's him," he whispered. I twisted in the booth, but the coat was already gone, and the street outside was a blur of headlights and winter breath. I threw money on the table. "Come on." Phelps lurched out after me, moving fast now, fear lending him speed. We reached the curb. He started toward his parked car across the street. "Wait," I snapped, because the street felt wrong, too open, too eager. He did not wait. A vehicle came out of nowhere, a dark sedan moving fast, not weaving, not hesitating. It did not bother to slow. It clipped Phelps hard, threw him sideways like a rag, and kept going as if the driver had merely hit a pothole. I ran, heart punching my ribs. People shouted. A cab honked. The sedan vanished into traffic with the easy grace of a plan. Phelps lay on the asphalt, eyes wide, trying to breathe and failing. His mouth moved. I knelt, leaning close. "Edwin, stay with me." His eyes fixed on mine. His lips formed words with effort. "Box," he rasped. 714. "I have it," I said. He swallowed, a wet sound. "Not midnight," he whispered. "They said, tomorrow. They said, deliver it to West 35th. My throat went dry. "West 35th, our address." His eyes fluttered. "They know your house." Then his gaze slid away, and the city's noise rushed back in as if it had been waiting politely. Sirens arrived. A crowd formed. I stood there on the curb with the receipt clenched in my fist and the cold realization settling in my chest. The enemy had stopped warning and started striking, and now they were planning a delivery not to Kessler, not to the Foundation, but to Nero Wolfe's front door, with my name on the route. Chapter 6, a hit and run in Manhattan, is supposed to be anonymous. The city provides the anonymity like a public utility. The driver disappears into traffic, the witnesses disagree about the color, and the victim becomes a paragraph in tomorrow's paper. This one did not cooperate. By the time the ambulance arrived, Edwin Phelps was still alive, though the effort looked expensive. A uniformed cop tried to keep me back as if my tie made me contagious, but I showed him the receipt from the mailbox store and the look on my face, and he decided he had other duties. The paramedics worked fast, professional and grim, and one of them looked up at me. "Friend?" she asked. "Not exactly," I said. "More like a man who just improved my odds of not getting killed by paperwork." She did not appreciate the phrasing. She waved me closer anyway. Phelps's eyes found mine again. His lips moved, but the street noise and the panic swallowed it. I leaned down until my ear was near his mouth, close enough to smell him, and that was when the detail lodged in my brain like a burr. Not blood, not rubber, not exhaust. Cologne sharp, medicinal, expensive. Not the sweet stuff worn by men who want to be noticed, but the clean, slicing kind worn by men who want to control the room while pretending they are simply present. Phelps's eyes rolled slightly, then steadied. "You said West 35th, I murmured. His mouth worked. "Tomorrow," he whispered. "They said tomorrow deliver, your house." "Who?" I asked. His eyelids fluttered. "No name." I leaned closer. "The envelope's anything mark seal." He swallowed with effort. "Thick, fancy, smelled like Dr. Money." "That cologne," I said. His eyes widened a fraction, as if relieved I had caught it. He managed a faint nod. "Sharp," he rasped. "Medicine. Expensive always. On the envelopes." Then his gaze slid away, and the paramedic pushed me back and told me to move, which I did, because when a woman with an oxygen mask in her hand says move, you move. At the hospital they let me in long enough for a doctor to tell me Phelps would live, barring complications, and that he had already asked, through clenched teeth and a cracked voice, whether the police were being told about box 714. Then they pushed me out, and I called Saul Panzer from the sidewalk. "Saul," I said. "Phelps survived barely. He gave us something." Saul's voice stayed level. "What?" "A smell," I said. The envelope smelled like a specific cologne, sharp, medicinal, expensive, like money pretending it went to medical school. There was a pause. Saul does not pause for drama. He pauses to retrieve a file from his mind. "Understood," he said. "I will work it." I hung up and went straight back to the brownstone. Wolfe was in the office, sitting as if the chair were his natural environment, and the rest of the house was merely scenery. Fritz hovered in the doorway with a look that suggested he had been polishing the same spot on the banister for half an hour to avoid worrying. I walked in and said, "Phelps is alive, for now." Wolfe's eyes narrowed. Did he speak? "Yes," I said. "Tomorrow delivery plan to this house, and one detail that matters." Wolfe lifted his chin slightly. "Proceed." I told him about the cologne, the sharp, medicinal, expensive scent on the envelopes, how it had hit me as clearly as the smell of ink. Wolfe's eyes tightened. "Scent is careless, not if the man wearing it thinks he is untouchable," I said. Wolfe nodded once. "Correct, the untouchable are often sloppy. They confuse privilege with invisibility," I said. "If Saul can match it, we have a name." Wolfe's voice stayed calm. "If Saul cannot match it, we still have a category. The kind of man who wears an expensive scent to work and does not fear leaving traces." I sat at my desk and tried to ignore the soreness in my legs from running, the image of Phelps tumbling under headlights, and the knowledge that someone had decided to send a message to Wolfe's address. My phone buzzed once, then fell silent. For the first time in 2 days, the enemy did not text. That made me more nervous, not less. At 4:30 Saul arrived, quiet as always. He sat in the red leather chair and looked as if he had never been surprised in his life. Wolfe said, "Report." Saul nodded. "The cologne." "Yes," Wolfe said. Saul's mouth tightened slightly, which for Saul is excitement. "It matches. A donor on the Kessler Foundation board. Name is Carlin Vane." I blinked. "Carlin Vane, the one with the charity photos and the opinions." Saul nodded. "He wears money like armor and smiles like a blade. He is known for a particular scent, sharp, medicinal, expensive. He likes to make an impression without raising his voice." Wolfe's eyes narrowed. "How do you know the scent?" Saul's gaze stayed steady. "I asked people who have been close enough to him to regret it. They remembered." I leaned forward. "What's Vane's role on the board?" Saul said. "He is not merely a donor. He sits on the Investment Oversight Committee." That made the room colder. Wolfe said, "Ashford Meridian is acquiring influence through the Foundation's investment arm." Saul nodded. "Yes," I said. "So Vane has proximity to the Foundation's structure and incentive to control Kessler." Saul shrugged slightly. "Proximity, yes. Incentive, likely. He has had conflicts with Kessler over control. Kessler is the public face. Vane prefers being the hand on the lever." Wolfe leaned back a fraction. "A man like that would not forge signatures himself." Saul said, "Number he would hire a craftsman." "And the craftsman," I said, "buys fancy paper and ink, runs courier accounts, cleans records, and leaves cologne on envelopes, because the handler doesn't mind being smelled." Wolfe's eyes narrowed. "Or because the handler touches the envelopes himself." Saul's gaze shifted briefly to me. "If Vane handled the envelopes, he is closer to the mechanics than expected." Wolfe's mouth tightened. "Or he believes he can afford to be close." I asked, "Can we prove it?" Wolfe looked at me as if I had asked whether gravity could be proved. "We will," he said, "by forcing haste." Saul's eyes stayed on Wolfe. "You have a plan." Wolfe nodded once. "Naturally." He looked at me. "Archie, you will bait the forger." I raised an eyebrow. I was hoping for something calmer, like juggling knives. Wolfe ignored me. "We will leak a false emergency, a transfer needing Mr. Kessler's signature by morning." I frowned. "But Kessler isn't signing anything." "He will not," Wolfe said. "That is the beauty of it. The enemy will believe they have an opportunity to secure the signature through pressure or deception. If they rush to help, we will see who has been holding the pen." Saul's voice was calm. "How do we leak it without leaking to the police, too?" Wolfe's eyes narrowed. "We leak it to the correct ears. Mr. Kessler's counsel, Mr. Pell, will be invited here. He will be told, in confidence, that an emergency transfer must be executed to block Ashford Meridian's control move. He will object. He will fret. He will speak to someone to protect his client, and that someone will not be the person we intend. I stared. You're using Pell as a conduit. Wolfe's tone was dry. As a sieve, his caution will filter truth into the enemy's hands. Saul said, and Kessler, Wolfe replied. Kessler will be informed only enough to appear sincere. He is frightened. His fear will be convincing. I said, what's the fake transfer? Wolfe's eyes narrowed. A document indicating that Kessler intends to move the Foundation's investment oversight authority to an independent trustee, effective immediately, requiring his signature by 9 tomorrow morning. It will appear to destroy Vane's leverage. Saul nodded. That will make Vane move. Wolfe's voice stayed calm. Yes, and it will make the craftsman move too. When an operation is threatened, the operator appears. Even businessmen lose patience when profit is endangered. I leaned back, thinking, if Vane is behind this, he'll send muscle or he'll show up himself. Wolfe's mouth tightened. He will send someone, but he may also be unable to resist observing. Men who wear their money like armor enjoy watching fear up close. Saul said, we should have Kramer. Wolfe's eyelids lowered. We will have Kramer. Not yet. If we involve the police too early, the prey retreats. That's always your complaint, I said. You treat murder like bird watching. Wolfe's gaze turned cold. Do not be foolish. This is not amusement. It is necessity. 2 men are dead. A third nearly joined them. We must end it. His voice was flat on the last words, and it carried more heat than his yelling would have. I nodded. All right. How do we bait? Wolfe said. You will call Mr. Pell and request his presence tonight. You will tell him Mr. Kessler is here. I blinked. He is, Wolfe continued. You will tell him I have devised a strategy to protect Kessler by preemptive action. You will show him a draft of the emergency. Transfer, not yet executed. You will insist on secrecy. You will then allow him to leave with the knowledge, and you will watch where that knowledge travels. Saul's eyes narrowed. You want me to tail Pell? Yes, Wolfe said. You and Durkin quietly. If Pell speaks to Vane, we will know our suspicion is correct. If Pell speaks to someone else, that someone else becomes interesting, I said. And if Pell tries to keep it truly secret. Wolfe looked at me with mild contempt. Pell is a lawyer. He is paid to worry. Worried men speak. That night, Kessler arrived at the brownstone, pale and exhausted, with a new bandage on his knuckles that suggested he had been punching furniture. Pell followed, full of righteous caution. Mara Wexford did not attend, which Wolfe noted with a glance and stored away. Wolfe laid out the bait with the calm precision of a man setting a table. He spoke of the Foundation's investment arm, of Ashford Meridian's quiet acquisitions, of the risk of losing control through a technical mechanism. He produced a document draft, typed neatly, with blanks for signature, and called it an emergency measure designed to block a hostile takeover. Pell objected immediately. That was his nature. He complained about exposure, about legality, about optics, about everything except the fact that Kessler's signature had become a loaded gun. Wolfe listened patiently, then said, Mr. Pell, you will do what you wish, but tomorrow morning at 9 this document will either be signed or it will be irrelevant. That is your choice. Pell blinked. Why 9? Wolfe said, because timing creates urgency. Urgency creates errors. Errors reveal hands. Pell looked at Kessler. This is reckless. Kessler's voice was thin. Everything is reckless now. Pell left with his jaw tight and his mind racing. Saul left 10 minutes later quietly to follow him. Kessler sat in Wolfe's red leather chair looking like a man who had discovered that his name was no longer his. He stared at the blank signature line on Wolfe's draft and whispered, They will come. Wolfe's voice was calm. Yes, Kessler swallowed. To kill me. Wolfe shook his head slightly. To control you, killing you is an expense they prefer to avoid. Kessler's eyes flashed. They killed 2 men. Wolfe's gaze remained steady. They killed men who were removable. You are not removable. You are profitable. That was not comforting, but it was accurate. And accuracy is Wolfe's only form of mercy. At 11:30 my phone buzzed. Not a threat this time, but a call from Saul. He spoke quietly. Pell went straight to Carlin Vane. I felt my mouth go dry. Direct? Yes, Saul said. Vane was at a private club. Pell entered, stayed 12 minutes, left. Vane left 5 minutes after him, in a car. Coming here? I asked. Not yet, Saul said, but he is moving. I looked at Wolfe. He was watching my face and reading it the way he reads a contract. Vane, I said. Wolfe nodded once. Good. Kessler's hands clenched. What does that mean? Wolfe's voice was calm. It means the man who wears the cologne is now alert. It means he will send someone, possibly the craftsman, possibly the muscle, possibly himself. I swallowed. And if someone rushes to help. Wolfe's eyes turned cold and satisfied. Then we will know who has been holding the pen. Outside, the street was quiet. Winter quiet, the kind that makes footsteps sound like decisions. Inside the brownstone, we waited, not for a delivery, but for a visitor. And I found myself thinking that paper had finally stopped being the weapon. Now it was the bait chapter. 7 in New York. When you dangle bait, you learn quickly what kind of fish you have. A cautious fish circles. A hungry one bites. A confident one bites and expects you to thank him for the meal. Wolfe wanted confidence. Confidence makes mistakes on schedule, so we set a schedule. The draft emergency transfer lay on Wolfe's desk like a respectable lie. It was typed on heavy stock, crisp and official, and it promised the sort of internal shift that would make Ashford Meridian's quiet purchases meaningless. It also required one thing, the one thing our enemy could not tolerate, not controlling Alton Kessler's signature. Kessler sat in the red leather chair, looking like a man who had learned his name could be used as a weapon against him. He had stopped asking whether it could get worse. He was now asking how fast. Wolfe sat behind his desk with his beer and his calm, and he watched the clock the way a farmer watches the sky when he smells rain. At 12:48, the doorbell rang. He looked at Wolfe. He did not move. The bell rang again, then a quick knock, polite but insistent. Wolfe's eyelids lowered. That is rapid. Kessler's mouth went dry. They came, perhaps, Wolfe said. Archie, I was already up. Yes. Do not indulge heroics, Wolfe said. I never do, I told him, and went to the door. A man stood on the stoop holding a slim leather portfolio. Average height, neat suit under his dark coat gloves. Polite eyes. The kind of face you forget while you're still looking at it. That was always the warning sign. Memorable faces belong to amateurs. Delivery for Mr. Wolfe, he said. From Santa, I said. Or a creditor. His mouth tightened faintly. From Mr. Pell's office. That was the right lie too fast. Pell would have called first and argued until the phone melted. Pell did not use anonymous messengers to deliver urgent legal documents at 1 in the morning. This man had the wrong confidence. I took the portfolio without letting him step inside. Wait, he nodded serene. Of course. I carried the portfolio into the office and laid it on Wolfe's desk. Wolfe stared at it as if it might crawl. Too fast, I said. Wolfe's gaze stayed on the portfolio. Yes. He opened it with deliberate care. Inside were 3 documents. Each typed, each prepared as if a law firm had been asked to produce salvation in triplicate. The first was our emergency transfer, copied almost exactly. The second was an affidavit describing the transfer as voluntary. The third was a cover letter, polite, reasonable, and heavy with language about protecting the foundation. The new detail was in the witness block. The witness name was printed cleanly. Neil Bauer Kessler made a sound in his throat that was half gasp and half anger. That's impossible. Wolfe's eyes turned cold. It is criminal. I leaned closer. They're using a dead clerk as witness. Wolfe lifted the affidavit, and they have added notarization language. Which they can't legally do, Kessler said, voice shaking. Wolfe's tone stayed calm. They do not require legality, they require appearance. I looked at the cover letter. It offered help. It offered speed. It offered a way out. It also offered to wrap Kessler tighter in the cage by making him sign something willingly. Wolfe's gaze moved to me. Archie. Yes, you will follow him, Wolfe said. Kessler jolted. Number Wolfe did not spare him a glance. The messenger is too prompt. He expects we will accept assistance. You will accept it enough to trace it. Kessler's face went pale. They will kill him. Wolfe's voice was flat. They will attempt it. Archie will attempt to prevent it. Mr. Kessler, you hired me to avoid catastrophe. Permit me to work. Kessler swallowed and sat back down, hands clenched until the knuckles looked like white chalk. I returned to the hall, opened the door, and let the messenger in. He stepped inside as if he belonged. Legitimate messengers have hesitations. They ask for signatures. They give receipts. This one gave nothing but composure. I led him toward the office, then stopped in the hall and turned, blocking the path with my body as if it were casual. Mr. Wolfe has questions, I said. He wants to meet whoever prepared these. The messenger's eyes flicked, calculating, then returned to calm. They were prepared by counsel. Which counsel? I asked. He smiled faintly, indulgent. It doesn't matter. It protects Mr. Kessler. Nothing matters like who holds the pen, I said. Wolfe wants verification on the notarization. He wants to meet the person responsible. A fraction of hesitation, then a nod. I can take you, the messenger said. Now, I said. Now, he agreed too easily. I glanced into the office. Wolfe's eyes met mine, steady, unreadable. No encouragement, no warning, just the look that meant, do your job, and do not ruin my carpet. I took my coat and hat and followed the messenger into the winter. He walked briskly, not rushed. He did not look back. He expected obedience. And when someone expects obedience, the world often obliges to avoid argument. We went 3 blocks, turned onto a quieter street, and stopped at a narrow entrance. He produced a key without fumbling and led me up 1 flight. The building smelled of dust and weak disinfectant, the sort of place rented by men who wanted anonymity and did not care about comfort. He opened a door and gestured me inside. The room was small and mean. Cheap bed, small table, 2 chairs, a portable embossing press on the table, bottles of ink, heavy paper stock practice sheets stacked neatly, and on those sheets, like a litany, Alton Kessler's signature, repeated until it looked as natural as breathing. A man sat at the table, sleeves rolled, fingers stained dark with ink. He looked up calmly and smiled, as if I were a delivery he had scheduled. Mr. Goodwin, he said. My skin prickled. We haven't met. No, he replied. But I know who you are. You've been busy. The messenger closed the door behind me. I let my gaze roam the table again, and then I saw what stopped my breath. A torn logbook page lay beside the press, the missing page from Neil Bauer's notary ledger. The ragged edge matched the tear I had seen in the evidence bag. But now the page was filled out neatly, with entries written in a steady hand. One entry stood out like a bruise. A transfer authorization, dated yesterday evening, signed Alton Kessler, witnessed and notarized Neil Bauer. Already filled, already signed, already ready to be planted back into the ledger as proof. The record had always been there. The ink-stained man followed my gaze and smiled faintly. You like it, he said. It completes the record. People feel calmer when records are complete. I kept my voice steady. You stole that page. He shrugged. I reclaimed it. It was mine the moment Bauer wrote on it. You killed him, I said. His smile did not change. I write, I do not kill. Summoning jammed a pen through his hand, I said. That was crude. He replied with mild distaste. Not my style. Not a denial. A criticism that told me he was not the top of this chain. He was a craftsman. Someone else was giving orders. Someone else was willing to use uglier tools. I leaned closer, keeping my hands visible. You have Bauer's stamp too. Tools are tools, he said. Paper requires tools. And who wants Kessler obedient? I asked. His eyes tightened slightly. You already know. You can smell him. There it was. The cologne. Carl in vain, I said. So you're the pen, and he's the hand. His smile thinned. I produce outcomes. Outcomes with forged signatures, I said. A signature is a symbol, he replied. People worship symbols. I glanced at the messenger near the door. His hands were in his coat pockets. The outline under the fabric was too straight and too heavy. Gun. I took a half step back. You didn't bring me here to reassure me. The ink man's voice stayed polite. Number, we brought you here to stop you. The messenger's hand moved. I moved first. I swept my arm across the table, knocking ink bottles, practice sheets, and the press onto the floor. Glass shattered. Ink splashed and spread like a dark bloom. The craftsman jerked back instinctively, hands rising to protect his tools. The messenger's gun cleared the pocket, but his aim shifted for a heartbeat. That heartbeat was my rent payment. I bolted toward the door. The messenger fired. The shot tore into the doorframe and sprayed wood. I slammed into him shoulder first, and we hit the wall. He was solid, but he moved like a man hired to intimidate, not a man trained to fight. I grabbed his wrist, twisted hard, felt bone protest, and the gun dropped to the floor. He hit me with his left fist. The room flashed white. I fell to one knee, mouth tasting metal, and saw the craftsman reaching not for the gun but for the torn log page. Of course, business protects the books first. I lunged, grabbed the page, and tore it down the middle as I fell backward. The craftsman made a sharp sound, anger, pure and sudden. No, he snapped. Now it's honest, I said, and reached for the gun on the floor. The messenger kicked at me. I rolled, got the gun in my hand, and aimed. It is amazing how quickly two men become reasonable when you point their own mistake at them. Back, I said. They froze. The hallway door slammed. Footsteps pounded up the stairs. Saul Panzer came into the room like a shadow that had learned to carry weight. Fred Durkin was behind him, breathing hard, eyes hard. Saul's gaze swept the room in one calm glance and took in everything. Ink everywhere, press on the floor, the messenger held in place by fear, the craftsman's calm cracking, me with a gun and torn paper. Saul said, "Good evening." The messenger's shoulders sagged. He knew what it meant when Saul arrived on time. Durkin moved in and grabbed the messenger, pinning him with the casual competence of a man who enjoys grabbing nuisances. The craftsman's eyes flicked toward the window. Saul shifted slightly, blocking the path without looking as if he were blocking anything. "You won't go," Saul said quietly. The craftsman's mouth tightened. "This is unpleasant." "It usually is when the business fails," Saul replied. I lowered the gun, breathing hard, head ringing. Ink splattered on my sleeve like a cheap tattoo. Saul glanced at me. "You all right?" "I've been better," I said, but the missing log page was here, already filled and ready to plant. I tore it. Saul's eyes flicked to the halves. "Good." Durkin dragged the messenger toward the hall. Saul kept his attention on the craftsman, who was now very still, the way men become still when they realize control has moved away from their hands. Durkin cuffed the messenger and relieved him of his weapon. Saul kept his attention on the craftsman while Durkin took the portfolio and the embossing press for evidence. "You're coming with us," Saul said quietly, and the craftsman's smile finally disappeared. I pulled out my phone and called Wolfe. He answered immediately. "Wolfe," I said. Bait worked. Messenger came too fast with the right forms and the wrong confidence. He led me to a rented room, portable press, special ink, stack of practice signatures, and the missing logbook page was here, already filled out and ready to be planted. Gunman tried to erase me. Saul's timing kept the case breathing. There was a pause, then Wolfe's calm voice. "Excellent." I stared at Saul and mouthed, "Excellent," as if Wolfe had complimented my necktie. Wolfe continued, "Bring the evidence, bring the men, and bring yourself." I hung up and looked at Saul. "Now we have the craftsman." Saul's eyes were steady. "And now the man who wears cologne like a warning will move." I glanced at the ink. Stained man still calm enough to be dangerous, and the torn log page halves in my hand. Paper had been the weapon. Paper had been the cage. Now paper was the confession. Chapter 8. If you want to see how frightened rich people behave, do not corner them in an alley. Invite them into a respectable room and offer them tea. They will bring their fear with them anyway, but they will disguise it under manners, and they will hate you for making them show it. Wolfe's summons went out before breakfast, which for Wolfe is a declaration of war. He dictated to Fritz, who wrote the messages in his neat hand, and I made the calls that required a voice with fewer syllables of contempt. The pretense was simple and sharp. A scandal was forming. The market would open soon. The Kessler Foundation and its investment arm were vulnerable to hostile influence. If the board did not act at once, they would wake to headlines, regulators, and the kind of questions that make donors vanish, that got them moving. By 9:30, the front room of the brownstone had acquired the distinct smell of expensive coats drying in our heat. Fritz collected hats with dignified patience. I collected names with less dignity. Carlin Vane arrived last. He entered as if he owned the threshold. He wore money the way a man wears armor when he expects to be attacked, and he smiled like a blade that has already decided where it wants to cut. He also carried his cologne with him like a banner, sharp and medicinal and expensive, and it followed him into the hall before his shoes did. I inhaled once, just to confirm Saul had not been poetic. Wolfe was in the office, seated behind his desk, composed and broad and unyielding. The room was set the way Wolfe likes it when he intends to conduct a performance. Chairs arranged, desk cleared except for the stacks of documents, and his expression fixed in that mild look that says he is prepared to be insulted by stupidity. Kessler sat to one side, stiff as a man attending his own trial. Howard Pell hovered behind him, still convinced caution could stop a locomotive. Saul Panzer was present, quiet and positioned, so that anyone who attempted to leave quickly would find their legs reconsidering. The board members came in one by one. There was Judith Marr, vice chair, elegant and brittle, the sort of woman who could freeze a room with a compliment. There was Gerald Bostwick, a real estate donor, who always looked as if he had just woken from a nap he did not want to admit to. There was Lena Cow, the investment committee member with sharp eyes and a face that did not waste sympathy. And there was Carlin Vane, who sat as if he expected the chair to be grateful. Wolfe regarded them all, then said, "Good morning." They murmured variations of it, except Vane, who said nothing and smiled. Wolfe continued, "You are here because the Kessler Foundation is at risk, not from market forces, from deliberate manipulation." Judith Marr's lips tightened. "Mr. Wolfe, this is highly irregular." Wolfe's gaze was steady. "Irregularity is a minor offense compared to ruin." Bostwick cleared his throat. "What exactly is the issue?" Wolfe lifted one of the forged documents between thumb and forefinger, as if it might leave a stain. "Forgery." The word landed hard. People like that dislike the word, because it suggests that their world is not protected by their accounts. Carlin Vane's smile remained. "That is a strong accusation." Wolfe looked at him. "It is accurate." Vane's eyes did not flinch. "Mr. Kessler has claimed forgery before. It may be an excuse for poor control." Kessler's hands clenched. Pell shifted, ready to object. Wolfe raised a hand, and they stopped. When Wolfe raises a hand, even lawyers pause, because they sense a verdict is coming. Wolfe said, "Before the market opens, I will prevent a scandal. You will listen." He began laying out the mechanics, not as a speech, but as if he were reading a recipe. He described the signatures, how they were not traced but constructed, built stroke by stroke from practice sheets, until they became muscle memory. He described the ink, consistent across documents, and the paper, heavy stock, chosen to behave under pressure. He spoke of the portable press found in the rented room, of the special ink used for embossing, and of the practice signatures stacked like hymns. He described the routing of the documents, the courier service account paid in cash with a fake name, the mailbox store where pickups were staged, and the careful scheduling that made the operation look like routine commerce. He described Neil Bauer, the notary clerk, dead with a pen through his hand. Safe untouched, drawers closed, staged mess, and the missing page torn from his logbook. Judith Mard's face tightened as Wolfe spoke. Lena Keo listened with the stillness of a woman, adding columns in her head. Bostwick blinked too often. Vane remained calm, but the calm looked more deliberate now, as if held in place by effort. Wolfe then held up the torn halves of the missing logbook page, which I had brought in a sealed folder. He did not display them like trophies. He displayed them like evidence that the world did not match the board's assumptions. This, Wolfe said, was removed from Mr. Bauer's logbook, filled out after his death, and prepared to be planted back into the binding to create a false record. Pell inhaled sharply. Judith Marr looked sick. Bostwick's face drained. Vane's smile narrowed. You are suggesting an elaborate conspiracy. Wolfe's eyes narrowed. It is not conspiracy. It is business. Lina Chow spoke quietly. Who benefits? Wolfe looked at her. A shell company, Ashford Meridian LLC, has been quietly acquiring influence in the Foundation's investment arm. The purpose is leverage, quiet power, loud control. Vane leaned forward slightly, voice smooth. Ashford Meridian could be anyone, a rogue trader, a rival donor. This is speculation. Wolfe's gaze moved to Vane and stayed there. You are correct, it could be anyone, which is why we consider who has knowledge, access, and motive. Vane tilted his head. And you intend to accuse a board member in your parlor? Wolfe's tone remained mild. My office. Vane smiled faintly. Fine, consider access. Consider the staff. Mr. Kessler's assistant handles deliveries, handles papers, remembers details. Such a person could easily provide signature samples and routing information. I watched Vane as he spoke. His voice was too smooth, his blame was too ready. He was steering, and he did it with the confidence of a man who expects others to follow. Wolfe let him speak. Wolfe always lets people build their own gallows. Yes, Wolfe said when Vane finished. We have considered the assistant. Kessler's head snapped. Mara. Wolfe lifted a hand again. We have also considered counsel, finance, and any intermediary. But you, Mr. Vane, have made a small error. Vane's smile did not change. Have I? Yes, Wolfe said. You mentioned the binding. There was a faint pause, so small it might have been imagined. But I saw it. Wolfe saw it. Saul saw it too, because Saul's eyes sharpened. Vane's voice stayed steady. Binding. Wolfe nodded. You referred to the notary clerk's torn logbook binding. Vane shrugged slightly. It was in the newspapers. Wolfe's gaze was cold. Number Judith Marr looked between them. Was it? Wolfe's voice stayed calm. The newspapers reported a dead clerk, a missing stamp kit, and a possible robbery. They did not report a torn page. They did not report the binding, because the page was discovered by my assistant and Inspector Kramer, and it was not released. Vane's smile tightened. Just a fraction. Perhaps I heard it from someone. Wolfe leaned forward slightly, and the room seemed to tighten with him. Indeed, Wolfe said, you heard it early. Knowledge that arrives early is a fingerprint. It shows where your hands have been. Vane's eyes hardened. That is absurd. Wolfe's voice remained mild, which is always the most dangerous version of Wolfe. Absurdity is not a defense. It is merely an opinion. Vane sat back, still composed, but the blade smile had lost a little edge. Wolfe continued. You have also made another error. You are wearing an expensive cologne with a sharp medicinal scent. That scent was present on the envelopes used to route these forged documents. Vane's eyes narrowed. Coincidence? Wolfe nodded once. Perhaps, but combined with your premature knowledge of the logbook binding, it ceases to be coincidence. It becomes habit. Lena Chow's eyes sharpened. You are saying Mr. Vane handled the documents, Wolfe replied. Either he handled them, or he stood close enough to someone who did. In either case, his proximity is no longer theoretical. Judith Marr's voice shook. Carlin. Vane smiled again. but now it was brittle. "This is outrageous. I donate millions to that foundation." Wolfe's eyes narrowed. "Yes, and you wish to control how those millions were used. When Mr. Kessler refused, you sought leverage." Kessler's voice was hoarse. "Vane." Vane turned to him, and the smile returned, sharper. "You wanted to sign that announcement and make yourself noble. You were going to tear down the people who built this with you." Wolfe's gaze cut between them. "We are not discussing morality, we are discussing mechanics, and the mechanics point to you." Vane's jaw tightened. "You have no proof." Wolfe lifted the forged transfer order. "You have purchased influence through Ashford Meridian." Vane's eyes flicked. "Prove it." Wolfe nodded slightly. "We will. The shell company's transactions, the courier account, the mailbox, and the rented room will provide names and receipts. But I do not require the future to state the present." Vane's voice sharpened. "You are bluffing." Wolfe's tone stayed calm. "Number you are." Vane stood abruptly. "This is a circus." Saul moved. Not fast, just enough. Vane paused, and I saw the calculation again. He could leave, but leaving would look like guilt. Staying would be worse. That was the trap Wolfe had built, and it did not require handcuffs to work. Wolfe said, "Sit down, Mr. Vane." Vane stared at him. "You cannot order me." Wolfe's gaze was steady. "I can, because if you leave now, I will call Inspector Kramer and report that you possess knowledge of evidence not public. I will also report the presence of your cologne on the documents, and I will provide the names of those who have already been detained in connection with the forgery operation. You may then explain to the police why you knew about a torn logbook binding." Vane's mouth tightened. He sat. Wolfe leaned back slightly, satisfied. "Good," Judith Marr whispered. "Carlin, what have you done?" Vane's smile returned, but it was no longer a blade. It was a mask with cracks. Wolfe looked at the room, at the frightened donors and the rigid tycoon and the lawyer who wanted to faint into a briefcase, and said quietly, "We will prevent the scandal, but we will not do it by signing anything. We will do it by removing the hand that has been holding the pen." And in that moment, with the market clock ticking somewhere beyond the brownstone's walls, I understood why Wolfe loved his office gatherings. They turn fear into truth, and truth, when it arrives early, leaves fingerprints. Chapter 9, if you ever want to see how loyalty behaves when it is introduced to the idea of prison, invite it into a warm room, offer it coffee, and mention a federal statute. Loyalty will usually excuse itself to the restroom and come back as self-preservation. Wolfe did not like warm rooms full of frightened donors. He tolerated them because they were efficient. After he had pinned Carlin Vane to his chair with that neat little thing about early knowledge, he let the board members stew for 10 minutes while he sent me to the hall to make calls. Inspector Kramer arrived in a mood that could have peeled paint. He brought Sergeant Pearlie Stebbins and 2 men who looked as if they had been trained to move quietly and enjoy it. Kramer stepped into the office, took one look at the assembled board and said, "Well, this is cozy," Wolfe replied. "Inspector, you are late?" Kramer's eyes narrowed. "I came as fast as your assistant called. What is it this time? A knitting circle." Wolfe gestured at the documents on his desk. Forgery, coercion, and 2 murders. Also a donor with an excessive cologne. Carlin Vane's smile twitched. Kramer sniffed once, as if deciding whether Wolfe was joking. "You called me here for perfume," Kramer said. Wolfe's voice stayed calm. "I called you here because Mr. Vane possesses knowledge he should not, and because the operation we discussed has now produced a workshop, a portable press, and a craftsman." Kramer's eyes sharpened. "You have the forger." "We have a forger," Wolfe corrected. "Not the forger." That landed. Kramer's mouth tightened. "Where is he?" "Detained," Wolfe said. "By Mr. Panzer's arrangements. He is available to you, but he will not provide you the truth. He will provide you an invoice." Kramer turned his head and spat out, "Stebbins." Stebbins moved with his usual mild eagerness. "Yes, Inspector." You and the boys go pick up whoever Panzer has, Kramer said. Bring him in. Stebbins nodded and left, looking pleased at the thought that he might get to do something besides. Listen, Kramer. Then looked at the board members. All of you stay put. Judith Marr stiffened. Inspector, I demand. Kramer cut her off with a glance. Demand it later. Sit down. Wolfe watched with faint satisfaction. Wolfe likes watching authority, bully wealth. It confirms his philosophy, I said. Kramer, we also need Mara Wexford. Kessler flinched at his assistant's name. Carlin Vane's eyes slid toward him and back. Calm but watchful, Kramer grunted. I can get her, Wolfe said. Yes, you will. Kramer's face reddened. Stop ordering me. Wolfe's voice stayed mild. Stop arriving late. Kramer muttered something that sounded like a threat and stepped into the hall to bark into his radio. While we waited, Wolfe continued. And he did it the way he always does when he wants to tighten a net. He spoke calmly about mechanisms. He repeated the facts, not for the board's comfort, but to make it impossible for anyone to claim confusion later. He described the courier route. He described the cash account. He described the mailbox box number. He described the hit and run that had almost killed the courier, and would have if the driver had chosen to be thorough instead of efficient. Then he turned his eyes on Kessler, and the room felt colder. Mr. Kessler, Wolfe said, you have been trapped by your own reputation. Kessler's jaw clenched. Yes, you hired an auditor, Wolfe continued, because you suspected internal theft. He was killed. You engaged counsel to protect you. You relied on your assistant to manage paper. You relied on the board to support your name. You were surrounded by reliability. Kessler swallowed. So? Wolfe's gaze shifted slightly. Reliability is useful to criminals. It can be predicted. Carlin Vane spoke smoothly. This is becoming philosophical. Wolfe looked at him. It is becoming precise. The doorbell rang again. Fritz brought in Mara Wexford, and for the first time I saw her lose control of her calm. Her coat was buttoned wrong. Her hair was perfect, but her face was not. She looked as if she had been told that the floor under her was imaginary. Kramer followed her in and said, Sit. Mara sat, eyes flicking from Wolfe to Kessler to Vane to me, like a woman trying to decide which cliff is shortest. Kramer said, All right, talk. Mara's voice was smooth on the first attempt. Inspector, I don't know what. Kramer leaned in. Save it. You arranged courier pickups. You handled forged documents. You're looking at prison. Start talking before you add time. Mara's lips tightened. Her gaze went to Kessler, and for a moment something like grief crossed her face. Mr. Kessler, she said softly. I never meant. Kessler's voice cracked. Mara, why? That did it. Her composure fractured. When a person has spent years being the calm center of someone else's storm, it takes one direct question to make her realize she is about to drown alone. I did it, Mara said. The room went very still. Even Vane stopped smiling for a second. Kramer's voice was flat. What did you do? Mara swallowed. I arranged pickups. I scheduled them. The courier account. I used cash. Judith Marr made a small sound, outraged and frightened. Lena Kau stared hard. Kessler looked as if he had been struck. I said, Who told you to? Mara's eyes flicked toward Vane and away again, as if afraid the movement itself would count as testimony. I was pressured, she said. Wolfe's tone stayed calm. By whom? Mara's voice shook. By Mr. Vane. Vane's smile returned sharp. This is absurd. Mara's eyes flashed. You told me the foundation would collapse if I didn't. You told me Mr. Kessler would be ruined and that the board would blame me anyway. You said you could protect me. Vane leaned back, composed. I spoke with you about donor relations. I never asked you to break the law. Kramer snapped. Shut up. You'll get your turn. Mara went on. Words rushing now. The way they do once fear realizes silence is no longer protection. He said the documents had to move quickly, she said. He gave me the account name, Ashford Meridian. He gave me the cash. He told me who to call at Eastbridge. He said it was to prevent a hostile takeover. Kessler's voice was hoarse. A takeover of my foundation. Mara nodded miserably. Yes, I asked. Did you know about the murders? Mara's face tightened with real horror. Number, I swear. I didn't know anyone would be killed. I thought it was pressure, paper pressure. I thought it was leverage, Wolfe said quietly. The difference between leverage and murder is only the moment someone decides a witness is inconvenient. Mara's eyes filled. I didn't want anyone dead. Kramer's mouth tightened. You still helped set the table. Mara swallowed hard and said the part that mattered most. Mr. Vane wasn't the mastermind, she blurted. He was the money. He financed it. He wanted control, but he didn't plan the details. He didn't know the papers. He just wanted the outcome. Vane's smile stiffened. Now she's inventing. Wolfe's eyes narrowed, not at Mara, but at the room as a whole. That is interesting, Miss Wexford. Mara looked at Wolfe, desperate now to be believed. It's true, he didn't write. He didn't know how. Someone else handled the mechanics, someone who knows legal paper. Wolfe nodded slowly. Yes, I felt it then. The shift Wolfe had been letting the room talk, letting Kramer shout, letting Mara spill. Wolfe had been waiting for one sentence. Someone who knows legal paper. Wolfe turned his head toward Howard Pell. Pell had been standing behind Kessler, like a protective shadow. He looked calm, almost offended by the noise, as if this were all a regrettable distraction from better things. Wolfe said, Mr. Pell. Pell blinked. Yes, Mr. Wolfe. Wolfe's voice was mild. You have been remarkably quiet. I am an attorney, Pell said smoothly. I prefer not to speak without necessity. Wolfe nodded. Then I will provide necessity. The true architect of this scheme is not Mr. Vane. It is you. The room froze. Kessler turned his head slowly, as if his neck resisted the idea. Pell. Pell's face did not change. That was his first mistake. Innocent men react when accused of engineering their client's ruin. Guilty men often attempt to remain calm because calm has been their mask for years. This is nonsense, Pell said. I have represented Mr. Kessler for 15 years. Wolfe's eyes narrowed. Which gave you control? Pell's voice stayed even. Control of what? Access, Wolfe said. Access to genuine signatures. Access to the papers that could ruin him. Access to the timing and the phrasing that would create maximum leverage without immediate collapse. Pell's mouth tightened slightly. You are speculating. No, Wolfe said. I am concluding. Carlin Vane spoke smoothly, eager. Finally, the lawyer. That is plausible. He handled everything. Wolfe's gaze snapped to Vane. Do not assist me, Mr. Vane. Your enthusiasm is unseemly. Vane's smile faltered. Pell said calmly, What proof do you have apart from insult? Wolfe lifted a small envelope from his desk, one I had not noticed among the stacks. He held it delicately. I have chemistry, Wolfe said. Pell blinked once. Chemistry. Wolfe nodded. The special ink used in the embossing press and in the manufactured log page contains a rare additive, a stabilizer used to prevent feathering on heavy stock. It is not common. It is used by one private stationery supplier in this city, a supplier known for serving attorneys who prefer their correspondence to look like authority. Pell's eyes narrowed. This is absurd. Wolfe looked at me. Archie, the name. I said, Hollis and Red Stationers. Pell's jaw tightened. It was the smallest movement, but it was there. Wolfe continued. Mr. Pell maintains an account there. He orders paper with that supplier's watermark and uses their proprietary ink blend. We obtained a sample from his office stationery and compared it chemically to the ink recovered from the rented workshop and the log page. Kramer's face hardened. You did a chemical test. Wolfe's tone stayed mild. I arranged one. It is not difficult to find a laboratory when one has money and indignation. Pell's calm began to look strained. Even if the ink matches, that proves nothing. Suppliers sell to many. Wolfe nodded. Yes, that is why we did not stop at the ink. The additive is rare. The ratio is distinctive. And you, Mr. Pell, made another mistake. Like Mr. Vane. Pell's eyes narrowed. What mistake? Wolfe's voice stayed calm. You knew which documents to forge to create the cage. You chose instruments that would terrify Mr. Kessler into obedience, without immediate public exposure. You arranged murders when witnesses became inconvenient, and you relied on your role as protector to remain near the victim at all times. Kessler's voice was raw. You killed Kroll. Pell looked at him steadily. Number Wolfe's eyes narrowed further. You killed Kroll to prevent him from reporting his findings. You killed Bauer to obtain the notary tools and erase the log entry that could expose your timeline. You attempted to kill Phelps because he could connect the courier route to your mailbox staging. You did not drive the car yourself, of course. You do not like getting your hands dirty. You hire. Pell's face stayed composed, but the skin around his eyes tightened. This is fantasy. Wolfe leaned forward slightly, and the air in the office tightened with him. No, Wolfe said. This is your business. You forged to control your client, then killed to protect the scheme. Kramer stepped closer, voice hard. Pell, you want to say anything before I read you your rights? Pell looked at Kramer, then at Wolfe. His calm was still there, but it was thinner now, like paper held up to light. You cannot prove murder, Pell said quietly. Wolfe's gaze was steady. Not yet. Pell's eyes flicked. There it was, the first real crack. He had heard the word yet. Wolfe's voice remained mild. You will, because you have one more error left to make, and you will make it because your confidence has always required the final word. I stared at Wolfe. Kessler stared at Pell as if seeing him for the first time. Mara sat rigid, tears held back by pride. Vane's smile had turned into a tight line, and his cologne suddenly smelled less like money and more like fear. Kramer said, Take him. Two plainclothes men stepped in. Pell's shoulders squared. He did not fight. He was too proud to wrestle, but as they moved him toward the door, his eyes met Wolfe's and held. You think you can control the story, Pell said calmly. Wolfe replied, I do not control stories. I control facts. Pell's mouth tightened. Facts can be arranged. Wolfe's eyes narrowed. Not in my office. They took Pell out. The room exhaled, shaky. Kessler sagged. Mara closed her eyes. Judith Marr looked as if she wanted to faint into her gloves. Vane sat very still, blade smile gone, armor suddenly heavy. Wolfe looked at Vane. Mr. Vane, you will remain. Vane's voice was tight. On what authority? Wolfe's tone stayed calm. On the authority of your own finances. Your money fed this machine. You will answer for that. But you are not the killer. Vane swallowed. You can't know that. Wolfe's eyes narrowed. I can. The killer required intimacy with Mr. Kessler's signature access and legal levers. You prefer spending money to create pressure. Mr. Pell preferred shaping paper into cages. Vane's face flushed. I wanted control. I did not want blood. Wolfe's voice was cold. Then you should have chosen a cleaner ambition. Kramer returned to the doorway and said, Wolfe, you got your man. Now give me the rest. Wolfe nodded once. You will have it. But the case is not finished. Kramer's eyes narrowed. Not finished. Pell's in cuffs. Wolfe's gaze was steady. A man in cuffs can still pull a string, and strings are what killed two men. I felt a chill. Wolfe was right. Pell had been calm because he expected something still to protect him. Wolfe looked at me. Archie, we will need one final piece. What? I asked. Wolfe's eyes narrowed. The location of the original signature samples, and the final document Pell intended Mr. Kessler to sign willingly. A cage is not built without a door. He will have prepared the door. I glanced toward the hall where Pell had been taken out, and felt my stomach tighten again. Because a man like Pell does not bet his life on paper, unless he has a last sheet hidden somewhere. And Wolfe had just told me we were going to find it before it found us. Chapter 10. Wolfe's office gatherings are not designed to entertain. They are designed to end things. Wolfe collects people the way other men collect stamps. Not for beauty, but for the satisfaction of placing them in the correct order and proving they belong there. That afternoon, with Howard Pell in custody and Carlin Vane pinned by his own money, Wolfe still refused to declare victory. That was one reason he is Wolfe. Another is that he is stubborn enough to treat any loose thread as a personal insult. By 5. The brownstone had been cleared of frightened board members, except those Wolfe wanted back. Kramer returned with Stebbins, more irritated than ever, because a man like Kramer resents the universe for requiring him to do paperwork after someone else has done the thinking. Kessler was in Wolfe's office again, pale but steadier now. Mara Wexford sat in the chair near the door, eyes red but chin high. Carlin Vane sat opposite Wolfe, wearing his money like armor that had cracked. Saul Panzer remained quiet in the background, as if the room itself had hired him for security. Wolfe waited until Fritz had brought coffee and removed himself, then said, "We will finish." Kramer grunted. "Finish, Pell's in cuffs. I'd like to finish by eating dinner." Wolfe looked at him, "Then eat later." Kramer glared but stayed. Wolfe began the way he always does, not with drama, but with structure. "Mr. Kessler," Wolfe said, "you are cleared of wrongdoing." Kessler exhaled like a man allowed to breathe for the first time in days, cleared in court. "In fact," Wolfe corrected. "The court will follow, now that the facts have been arranged properly." Pell's lawyer. Instincts had demanded chaos. Wolfe demanded order. Order is what makes a story believable to police and judges and newspapers, and Wolfe understands the public, as well as he understands orchids. Both are sensitive to the wrong touch. Wolfe turned his eyes toward Kramer. "Inspector, you will want motive and method." Kramer's jaw tightened. "I want a confession." Wolfe's voice stayed calm. "You will settle for an explanation. Confessions are unreliable. Reason is not." Kramer made a noise, but did not interrupt again. Wolfe said, "Howard Pell forged Mr. Kessler's signature using a constructed method. Mr. Leland, the handwriting expert, confirmed the signatures were not traced, but built stroke by stroke. That requires practice sheets, correct ink, and suitable paper. Those were found in the rented room." Mara's hands clenched. She stared at the floor as if she could scrape away guilt by looking at it hard. Wolfe continued. "Pell's purpose was control. He had represented Mr. Kessler for many years. He knew precisely which documents could ruin him publicly, regardless of their legal contestability. He also controlled access to genuine signatures and signature exemplars. An attorney's office is a private museum of a client's identity." Kessler's mouth tightened. "You're saying he owned my name?" Wolfe's eyes narrowed. He attempted to. Carlin Vane shifted in his chair. Wolfe's gaze flicked to him. "Mr. Vane," Wolfe said, "you financed the leverage. You did not devise the mechanism." Vane's smile tried to return and failed. "I wanted influence. It's not a crime." Wolfe's tone was cold. "It becomes one when you sponsor extortion and murder," Kramer interjected. "We'll sort his charges." Wolfe nodded once and moved on. "The murders," Wolfe said, "were not spontaneous. They were administrative." That phrase hit the room hard. Administrative murder, it sounded like a memo, which is exactly what it was. "Raymond Kroll," Wolfe said, "was killed because he was auditing, and because he found the first evidence of the constructed signature work. He would have traced the forged documents back through the courier routing, and the notary stamps. Pell eliminated him." Kessler's eyes closed briefly. "I hired him." "You hired a man who was competent," Wolfe said. "Competence threatens criminals." Wolfe's gaze shifted to Kramer. "Neil Bauer, the notary clerk, was killed for a more specific reason." Kramer leaned forward. "He was robbed." Wolfe's eyes narrowed. "Number," he was silenced. Bauer recognized Pell's constructed signature technique from prior filings. Kramer blinked. "From filings." Wolfe nodded. Mr. Pell had used notary services before, for legitimate purposes. Attorneys are creatures of habit. Bauer had seen the peculiar precision of Pell's writing, the pressure patterns, the rhythm. When the forged Kessler signature appeared in front of him, it resembled the same practiced construction. He did not know how, but he recognized the hand behind the ink. He threatened to expose it, or at least refused cooperation. Pell could not allow that, Mara whispered. He killed him. Wolfe's gaze remained steady. Yes, and he staged it as a robbery because robbery is a lazy story. Police enjoy. He left the safe untouched because he did not want money. He closed drawers because he wanted the scene to appear disturbed, but not chaotic. Chaos invites scrutiny. Kramer's face reddened. Don't talk to me about police enjoying. Wolfe raised a hand. Kramer stopped, because Wolfe's hand has done that to better men. Wolfe continued. The fountain pen through the palm was not merely murder. It was warning. It said, "Witness signatures at your peril." It also said to Mr. Kessler, "Obedience is cheaper than resistance." Kessler's hands clenched. He wanted me frightened. "Yes," Wolfe said. Wolfe turned slightly and gestured toward the sealed folder on his desk containing the torn halves of the logbook page. Pell tore out the logbook page because it recorded the notarization that would expose his timeline, Wolfe said. He then prepared a forged replacement, already filled out, already signed, already ready to be planted back into the binding. Vane spoke, voice tight. "That page was in the rented room. Your man tore it." I looked at him. "I tore it because I like honesty." Wolfe ignored the exchange. The forged log page was designed to provide retroactive proof. Pell intended to plant it, creating a record that supported his forged documents and blamed Kessler for voluntary action. Kramer's jaw tightened. "And the courier?" Wolfe nodded. Edwin Phelps nearly died because he could connect the courier route to the mailbox staging and therefore to the operator. Pell attempted to remove him. When that failed, he attempted to remove Archie. I held up my bruised knuckles. He was serious. Wolfe's eyes flicked to me. "Yes," Kramer asked. "Where's the final document?" Wolfe looked at Kessler. Pell's final goal was not merely to shift shares or control the foundation. It was to obtain a document signed willingly by Mr. Kessler, a capstone that would make all prior coercion appear voluntary. That document would have been a blanket ratification, endorsing all transfers and authorizing further control. Once Kessler signed that, he would be finished. Kessler's face hardened. He was going to own me. Wolfe nodded. "Yes, he forged the cage, then tried to persuade you to lock the door yourself." At that moment the doorbell rang. He moved toward the hall, but Saul stepped ahead of me because Saul always assumes the worst and is usually right. He opened the door a crack, glanced, then widened it. Two uniformed officers entered with Howard Pell between them. Pell was not in cuffs. He was too calm for cuffs. He walked as if he had returned to lecture us. Kramer swore. "What is this?" one officer said. "Inspector, there was a problem with transport, his attorney." Kramer roared. "His attorney." Wolfe's voice cut through the noise, calm and sharp. "Bring him in." Pell entered Wolfe's office with the composure of a man arriving at his own dinner party. His tie was still straight. His eyes were steady. Only the slight tightening around his mouth suggested irritation. "Mr. Wolfe," Pell said, "you are enjoying yourself." Wolfe regarded him. "Number, I am concluding." Pell's gaze slid to Kessler. "Alton, you should listen to your counsel. This is escalating into public spectacle." Kessler's voice was raw. "You killed men." Pell's eyes did not blink. "That is a dramatic accusation," Wolfe said. "Your drama is finished." Pell smiled faintly. "You have conjecture and an ink story. You do not have proof of murder." Wolfe leaned back slightly. "You are attempting your final bluff." Pell's gaze sharpened. "I am stating a fact. You cannot tie me to a car. You cannot tie me to a pen." Wolfe nodded once. "Number. But I can tie you to the ink." Pell's smile tightened. "Ink." Wolfe gestured to the evidence on his desk. "The special ink used in your embossing and your manufactured log page. contained a rare additive from your private stationery supplier. That chemical signature is as distinctive as a fingerprint. Pell's jaw tightened, just slightly. Suppliers sell to many. Wolfe said, not with that ratio, not with that blend, and not to men who have invoices. Kramer snapped. We have his stationery records. Pell's eyes flicked. Again, small again telling. Wolfe continued, you were careful, Mr. Pell, but you could not resist using the materials you trusted. That is how habit betrays intellect. Pell's voice stayed smooth. Even if you prove forgery, that is not murder. Wolfe's eyes narrowed. Number but forgery establishes motive, and motive establishes inquiry. Your phone calls, your payments, your cash withdrawals, your contact with the man in the rented room, your contact with the driver of the hit and run. Records will now be sought with proper focus. Pell's smile thinned. You are hoping. Wolfe's tone stayed calm. I am predicting. Pell looked at the uniformed officers and said, Gentlemen, I believe I should leave. This has become harassment. Kramer stepped forward. You're not leaving. Pell's eyes held steady. On what charge? Kramer's jaw clenched. Forgery, conspiracy, witness, tampering, obstruction. And I can think of a few more. Pell smiled faintly. Then charge me properly. Wolfe spoke, mild as ever. Before you go, Mr. Pell, I will answer the question you avoided. Why Bauer? Why that method? Pell did not reply, but he listened. He could not help himself. Wolfe is right about that. Men like Pell need the final word. They need to know the verdict, Wolfe said. Bauer recognized your constructed technique from prior filings. The pressure rhythm, the careful construction. He threatened to expose it. You could not risk it. You staged a robbery, used the fountain pen as weapon and warning, and removed the log page to replace it with your manufactured version. Pell's mouth tightened. He said quietly, You cannot prove that. Wolfe's eyes narrowed. You have already proven it. You came back here. You attempted to steer the narrative. You cannot stop yourself. That compulsion is your weakness. Pell's calm finally wavered, not in panic, but in irritation, as if he resented that his world had become loud. You think you have ended it, Pell said. But Kessler's name is still on paper. The world will still doubt him. Wolfe nodded slightly. The world doubts everyone. It is not the world's duty to be fair. It is yours, and you have failed. Kramer barked at the officers. Take him. This time the officers did. Pell opened his mouth, perhaps to produce the final word Wolfe had predicted, but the sound that came out was swallowed by the hall and the closing door. The ink at last was running out. Kessler slumped as if a weight had left his shoulders. Mara's eyes closed, and she exhaled shakily. Carlin Vane stared at the floor, armor suddenly useless. Wolfe turned to Kessler. Your foundation will be untangled. Kessler swallowed. How? Wolfe's voice was calm. By tracing Ashford Meridian's acquisitions and voiding them as coercive instruments once the fraud is established. It will be tedious. Your attorneys will earn their fees. Perhaps you will select a new one. Kessler managed a bitter sound that might have been laughter. Yes. Wolfe looked at Mara Wexford. Miss Wexford, your cooperation will reduce your consequences, but it will not erase them. Choose your next employer carefully. Mara nodded, tears finally slipping, but her voice steady. I will. Wolfe looked at Vane. Mr. Vane, your money purchased influence. It also purchased blood. That is a poor investment. Vane's jaw tightened. I did not intend. Wolfe raised a hand. Vane stopped, because Wolfe's hand has stopped more than one ego. When the room began to empty, and Kramer stomped out muttering about paperwork, Wolfe finally took a slow sip of beer and settled back as if returning to himself. I remained at my desk, rubbing my bruised knuckles and thinking about Fifth Avenue marble and Madison Avenue paper, and how quickly a man's life can be rearranged by ink. Wolfe said. Archie? Yes. You look thoughtful, Wolfe observed. I'm thinking about signatures, I said. On Fifth Avenue, A signature isn't handwriting, it's currency. Wolfe's eyes narrowed. Yes, that is why criminals counterfeit it. A counterfeit coin is obvious. A counterfeit signature is intimate. It steals a man's identity while he is still alive. I nodded, and it buys silence. Wolfe's gaze drifted upward, toward the stairs, toward the orchids waiting for him. Not here. Here it brought failure. Fritz appeared in the doorway at last, calm again now that the house had stopped hosting predators. "Mr. Wolfe," Fritz said, "dinner is ready." Wolfe's face softened. "Excellent." That time, when Wolfe said it, he meant it. I followed him out. And as the door closed behind us, I glanced once at the empty chair, where Howard Pell had sat, and tried to look like a man who could arrange the world with a calm voice. I decided I preferred my own method: quick feet, sharp eyes, and the stubborn refusal to let paper be the last word.